All right, test, test. Hello, good morning. I hope you had a lovely rest. You know, we spent a lovely evening together yesterday at Kokotang, so it's lovely to see you all here, nice and fresh, for the second day of CADALFEST. And today is going to be quite a different day in many ways, right? So we're going to start with a workshop, and I'll tell you more about the workshop in a second. And then in the second session, unfortunately, had to be cancelled because Gogu Shyamala's plane got cancelled due to airspace closure, unfortunately. But we have a few words and we have a poem that Gogu sent us, so that we'll be reading in the final session. But basically, the third session, the screening of the play by the Jangama Collective, will move forward, as will the discussion with Lakshmana and Mohit. And in the third session, we'll have a brand new event, the Roundtable, where we all kind of, we've planned it loosely, but there is still room for contributions if someone wants to kind of have an idea. So, well, thank you so much for all your kind of wonderful contributions. Gopika and Jayan, you just were wonderful, and we just all learned so much. My head is kind of full of new ideas, full kind of to burst. And just in terms of housekeeping, I want to briefly, as you know, we will be recording some of the sessions, so we'll be recording Preeti's presentation, but not the workshop as such, and we will then be recording everything from the discussions after the play afterwards. If anyone, and also Alvin is taking pictures as you see, so if anyone doesn't want to be on the recording or on the pictures that we publish on the website or on social media, please just let us know, and it'll be very easy to edit that out. So thank you very much. So just a few words in terms of introduction for Dr. Priteegandha Naik, who is an assistant professor at the Mukesh Patel School of Technology, Management and Engineering in NIMS University, where she teaches communication skills and almost everything else in relation to kind of English and humanities. But we met on a kind of a mentorship program, funnily enough. But anyway, it was never really that, it was like a friendship program for us in many ways. So it's been great, and we've been developing work together, and we've been developing workshop ideas that we would like to use in a kind of a wider project that we've been working on for over a year. And Alan knows what you're talking about. And so this is going to be, after Preeti's presentation, quite a workshop. We'll turn the lights on and we'll work together. And so it's going to be quite a different session from the previous ones. And we hope you're going to kind of help us shape these ideas. And you're very welcome to kind of have as much input as you like. But now I would just like to kind of take Preeti, start her presentation, and kind of thank you so much for putting this together. I know you've been working on this presentation and finessing it.
Oh, that's bright. These are just short people problems. Can you just pull it? Yeah, this is good. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so good morning. First of all, thank you for this wonderful opportunity. I'm intensely grateful to Nicole, to Judith, to NTU, to be part of CADALFEST 2025. So, as opposed to yesterday's wonderful sessions by Gopika and Jayan, this one is going to be slightly more experimental in design. The idea is to utilize Dalit Futurism, which I will discuss shortly, to construct anti-caste, imaginative, and literary futures. Now, I'll quickly run you through the roadmap of the session. So I will begin with a brief talk introducing Dalit Futurism, explaining its context, its concept, and ongoing evolution. Though most of us are familiar with the caste system, I still want to talk a little bit about it in depth, especially with respect to caste and technology and science. So this intersection of technology with caste is formed the basis for the development of Dalit Futurism, and I'll discuss this further soon. Okay, so as we all know, the caste system is a centuries-old system of stratification mandated by Hindu religious scriptures that dominates the Indian subcontinent. It divides the population into 4 varnas: the Brahmins, who are associated with intellectual learning, the Kshatriyas, who are the warrior caste, the Vaishyas, who are the merchant caste, and these 3 groups are referred to as the upper caste or the Savarnas, while the Shudras and the Avarnas, who are associated with manual labor, are considered to be the lowest in hierarchy. In addition to this, the Avarnas, politically also known as Dalits, face the additional discrimination of untouchability. Now, the caste system, as Dr. Ambedkar had said, does not just divide labor, but also divides laborers by associating each occupation with a pure or an impure status. This status is ascribed at birth and cannot be changed. Thus, unlike economic classes which allow mobility, caste is a rigid system and has created historical advantages for the upper caste and historical disadvantages for the Bahujans, the Adivasis, and the Dalits, who have difficulty accessing education, employment, and several other aspects of social and cultural life because of this status. Dalit Futurism is conceived as an interdisciplinary project that draws from various domains like Dalit studies, science fiction studies, and science and technology studies. This research on Dalit Futurism used established scholarship on the materiality of the caste system to propose a deeper investigation of the relationship between caste and technology to reveal its modern avatars. Here, I take precedence from previous scholarship that has used science fiction as a mode to discuss the relationship between society and technology. And here I do the same. I use Indian science fiction on caste to parse between caste, gender, technology, and introduce the concept of Dalit Futurism. I use Afrofuturism and other associated movements like Chicano Futurism, Latinx Futurism, Sino-Futurism, Adivasi Futurism, etc. to formulate Dalit Futurism as a methodological tool to analyze the representation of caste and gender in Indian science fiction. Initially, during my doctoral work, I conceived Dalit Futurism as an analytical framework that explored the representation of caste and gender in Indian science fiction in English. It was conceived as an interdisciplinary project, mainly because I studied in a technical university, and a purely technical university in India is a whole different environment altogether. The intersection between humanities and technology does not happen, which creates isolated areas of echo chambers where people believe that meritocracy is the be-all and the end-all here. Now, I posited Dalit Futurism as an intervention to the linear narrative often parroted by governments and tech fanatics who sought to establish machines and development as synonyms. So it was developed to understand the various ways through which existing inequalities, which are caused due to caste discrimination, lead to unique pockets of techno inequalities. So back in 2018, my project sought to understand the links between caste and technology. And this was a project that was extremely nascent in 2018. So I started looking at literature that examined how built technologies disadvantage the marginalized because products are embedded with the creator's biases. I suggested that existing inequalities, which are again caused due to caste discrimination, have a different way of being expressed through science, through laboratory lives, and through technology as well. Gradually, a pattern started emerging in the Indian space too. And to put it plainly, in Indian mainstream discourse, there is a perception that industrialization and urbanization would ultimately or has led to the destruction of the caste system. But we know that caste has instead influenced, it has interacted, and it has transformed old and emerging domains. I believe that the key to understand this contradiction is by understanding the difference between modernity and modernization. So Dipankar Gupta believed that the Indian idea of modernity is what he calls a mistaken modernity, because modernity by definition implies universalistic norms of equality, liberty, and individuality, which would ideally obliterate ritualistic hierarchies, but has not found purchase of the same kind in India. Instead, in India, social relations are still driven by considerations of caste, religion, and region. So instruments of modernity like democracy, industrialization, technological advancements are often mistaken for modernity itself. So for example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, several state governments immediately started actively supporting digital education without to impart lessons to students, without understanding that not everybody has access to these mobile phones. So this top-down approach does not necessarily address questions of access, of feasibility, which again led to a widening divide between the privileged and the marginalized sections, evidenced through the suicides of several Dalit girls and boys in Punjab and Kerala. Now, M.S. Pandian suggests that Indian modernity was hijacked by the upper caste, who had straightforward access to Western education, which enabled the appropriation of the principles of modernity with their own ideology. So Indian modernity came to reflect the ideals held by the upper caste, and caste came to be defined as, quote, something else, end quote, as a modern institution which was meant to preserve hygiene, to maintain division of labor, and for social organization as a benign system. So the issue is that scholars often approach caste as a pre-modern institution persisting in the modern era. Instead, such an approach does not necessarily allow us to look at how caste and different phenomena interact with each other. As the 21st century rides on the back of new and emerging technologies, my research suggested that it is important to understand how caste interacts with technology and the emerging techno-scientific culture. Now, before discussing Indian science fiction, I want to quickly establish how caste interacts with the production and reception of science and technology. Now, the formulation, production, and introduction of technology is not a uniform phenomenon. Natasha Aboiri's study on women sanchalaks in ICT centers in Gujarat notes that even after intense training the women undergo, they are still scared of using technology. She suggests that these computers designed by engineers in the Silicon Valley fulfill their needs and requirements, and transporting a technology in a different geographical location does not shear off the politics of its original formulation. So our understanding of the interaction between society and technology cannot be limited to just examining its introduction, but also the parameters of design, development, and production. Therefore, the social location, attitudes, biases, and prejudices of the creators become equally relevant to this process. So we can thus think of knowledge production, even the development of new and emerging technologies, in this way, that an anthropology of knowledge invites us to see our educational and research institutions as social systems. The three elements, social system, socialization, and belief system, are congruent with, mediate, and reinforce the existing framework of order, power, and ideology. The social relations of such institutions are the social relations of society. This understanding is also echoed by Abhasur's analysis of the careers of C.V. Raman, a Tamil Brahmin, and Meghnad Saha, a Dalit scientist. Her thesis draws associations between the social position of the scientists and their working style and relations with peers. So she attributes, quote, Brahminic aesthetics which embody a deeply internalized notion of a strict and orderly social organization, end quote, to Raman's perception of symmetry and order in crystalline structure, even against a chaotic background. On the other hand, Saha's explanation of why, quote, certain atoms seem to have exalted positions in the universe, end quote, suggested that instead of a stimuli that acts preferentially on atoms, it is the atoms themselves that respond preferentially to the stimulus. Now, Abhasur proposes that this explanation is congruent with Saha's views on the caste system, wherein he rejected traditional rules that believed that certain classes had divinely ordained attributes and instead advocated for the individual's competence. Other than analyzing their approaches, Soor also considers the treatment of their careers by biographers, who often attribute Raman's excellence and passion for knowledge to his Brahminical heritage, which again naturalizes his presence in the lab as a site of knowledge production, while Saha's caste is erased under the label of poverty, rendering Saha's presence as a quote breach in the area of knowledge production. The process of naturalizing sites of knowledge production as Brahminical spaces is evident in the inculcation of Brahminic norms like vegetarianism in institutions, celebration of classical music festivals like the Carnatic music festivals. Ethnographic studies also suggest that scientists and researchers dismiss the notion of caste privilege, but still draw inspiration from cultural figures from their caste and wholeheartedly believe in the notion of quote-unquote merit. So these ideologies are then transposed into the conceptualization and implementation of technologies. For example, one of the first e-governance services launched in the early 2000s catered to digitizing land records, a service that is of no use to Dalit laborers who are mostly landless. Even the admission of Aadhaar cards is difficult for Dalits and other marginalized sections, especially women, because most are paperless. This inaccessibility is observed when it comes to accessing the internet as well. Many activists believe that the internet would democratize access to information, that it would diversify discourse and include the perspectives and experiences of the Dalits, but legacy media, usually commandeered by the upper caste, have taken over here as well. In fact, many Dalit activists had hailed Twitter's blue tick system as a digital caste system. Female anti-caste activists have reported that they face threats and discrimination on the basis of both caste and gender. Even matrimonial apps and websites allow you to make your profile visible to only some castes and block off the others. So the creator's bias is also observed in the area of manual scavenging, a caste-based profession that has led to over 300 deaths in the past few years. Despite constitutional mandates against the practice, eradication technologies were only developed in 2016 and have still not been implemented. Research exploring casteism in technology has just started gaining ground. On the one hand, we need to discuss how the formation of the idea and its development congeal embedded biases, but on the other hand, we also need to discuss how Dalits and the marginalized navigate these fields. Palashi Vaghela's study highlights how Dalit software engineers navigate the field of computing through deflection and passing to participate and further their professional growth. All these instances help to debunk the notion of a post-casteist world and prove the impact of caste in the emerging culture. There is a need to understand and explore various transformative roles of caste and its manifestations, a project which is undertaken by the anti-caste movement. Taking precedence from other studies on science fiction, I propose this investigation through Indian science fiction on caste. During the development of this project, I needed to carefully justify the need to move away from realism in Dalit studies. Dalit writers and critics believe that realism is critical for the study of anti-caste literature as it helps convey the pain and trauma of experiences without diluting their intensity. I agree. However, there has also been a diversification of channels, of genre, of mediums, exploring the representation of caste through social media, through the internet, through graphic novels, and through many more other ways. I conceive Dalit Futurism to be part of the same diversification process, and I theorize it as an analytical framework that enables the exploration of caste futures in alternate techno-scientific worlds. It upholds Ambedkarism, which resists caste discrimination, by uncovering how caste influences different aspects of social, cultural, and political reality. It recognizes the potential in science fiction to defamiliarize the familiar and thereby provide freedom to its writers to explore different features of the caste. As a result, it can disrupt, it can question, it can challenge various notions about the caste system and allow this particular defamiliarizing technique to link the past, the present, and the future on a single platform. Dalit Futurism seeks to destabilize the boundaries between science fiction and Dalit studies to create an interdisciplinary space. It allows for a simultaneous movement between the fictional and the real, and the fictional engagement with caste-flavored technologies allows us to think a little bit more deeply about our present reality. And this engagement with caste futures is equally important because, and I concur with Mimi Mondal, that in a world where fundamental laws can be written, it is also illuminating which ones of them aren't. The author's priorities are more openly on display when a culture of non-humans is still patriarchal. There are no queer people in a far future society. And in a speculative future where it is possible to rewrite laws, rules, stereotypes, leaving them unchanged is equally political. So the transposition of caste in its various avatars in a futuristic setting does not mean that the genre is prophetic or virtuous, but that such scenarios capitalize on the quote-unquote ludic features of science fiction, which enable it to entertain various permutations and combinations of the emerging culture with the caste system. Indian science fiction on caste exaggerates certain tendencies of the caste system, making us aware about a milder version of that element in our social reality, and in the process also highlighting the arbitrariness and constructed nature of the caste practice. Now, before I talk about Dalit Futurism, I just want to give a brief background on futurisms in general. So the Futurism movement began in Italy and was later adopted by several other countries. These artists, the Italian futurists sought to cleave off from the past and instead envision better futures through new technologies. These movements, which included American and Italian futurisms, differ significantly from Afrofuturism because of the core difference in their philosophy. While the European and American futurisms were mostly inspired by Eurocentric notions of power and raced into the future without looking at the past, Afrofuturism resulted from a postmodern influx of migration, oral history, slavery, art, music, all these that foregrounded the potential of science fiction to speculate about the alienation and isolation experienced by the Afro-American community because of their history. Over a period of time, this movement has expanded in scope, moving beyond resisting and portraying optimistic black futures. Afrofuturism has inspired several other movements from marginalized communities that help articulate new futures. This includes Chicano futurism, which explores the relationship between Chicano culture and emerging techno-scientific developments, while Latinx futurisms, also inspired from Afrofuturism, attempts to rediscover and reconstruct Latin traditions of science fiction and other fantasy genres to resist the imposition of quote-unquote magical realism on Latin literary fiction. Steve Goodman coined Sino-futurism to refer to Chinese futurisms. Grace Dillon coined indigenous futurisms to refer to the visions of the future as envisaged by the authors of the First Nations. Closer home, we have Oshin Shiva, who uses Tamil Dalit futures to refer to their art practice that combines futuristic designs along with their Tamil Dalit heritage. Thus, each of these movements may have ideological overlaps, but have nonetheless charted their own unique identity. I conceptualize Dalit Futurism in a similar manner by drawing on these movements as it engages with the past, present, and the future moment of caste on a single platform. This is a speculative exercise that attempts to trace how caste may transform in the future if the present tendencies continue. Dalit Futurism is theorized as a method that attempts to expand the debates on caste, moving away from defining it as just a Dalit reality. Like Shailaja Paik suggests, we cannot afford to ghettoize the caste question as just a Dalit question because caste discrimination and caste privileges are two sides of the same coin. Just like there is no homogeneous identity of a Dalit community, the experiential reality of caste also needs to be explored in different ways. Therefore, the Dalit in Dalit Futurism uses this idea of Dalit consciousness and Ambedkarite ideology, which explores caste not just as a form of disadvantages, but also as a form of power and capital. And this investigation is a useful project because without an image of tomorrow, one is trapped by blind history, economics, and politics beyond our control. One is tied up in a web, in a net, with no way to struggle free. Only by having clear and vital images of the many alternatives, good and bad, of where one will go, will we have any control over the way we may actually get there in a reality tomorrow will bring all too quickly. And nothing gives such a profusion and richness of images of our tomorrows, however much they need to be revised, as science fiction. So this space gets a little bit more technical now. Now, Dalit Futurism uses defamiliarization and builds future histories through these science fictional devices called the novum and the megatext. Now, the novums could refer to both imagined, invented devices, as well as the social, cultural, and political forces that have been significantly altered in the text in such a way that they seem to fit it as natural, organic elements in the science fictional landscape. But these changed elements are still defamiliarizing for the reader. I'll be using this for analysis of a literary novel as well, so we'll be able to get a better idea about this. Now, the reader understands this altered world with the help of the megatext, which is like a repository of science fiction themes, tropes, and icons that do not have to be explained in the text anymore. But this understanding about the possibility of new technologies also has a cultural aspect to it. So these imagined elements are contextualized against the reader's cultural backgrounds. And these tools are then used in the form of a future history and defamiliarization, which function as building blocks of these alternate worlds. So as a thought experiment, Dalit Futurism engages with the past, present, and the future, enabling us to see how the world is and how it could be. Here the authors project to look back to explain how the fictional future, that is the current moment in the novel, occurred. In the process, our present is described as a prehistory of the future in that particular novel. The reader feels estranged when the familiar is made strange, but is also able to comprehend the alternate universe by using their own reality as a reference point. This process, wherein the reader feels estranged from the alternate world, but is also able to comprehend the fictional universe, is called cognitive estrangement. Now, I'll just use one particular book called Signal Red to explain this particular idea of Dalit Futurism. Now, Signal Red was penned in 2005 and republished in 2011 and is set in 2020. So it's a little bit of a temporal timeline jump. It is set in a defense research institute wherein all scientists are engaged in projects that aim to further the nation's security and protect its sovereignty. So if you remember 2005 was, if you remember the political climate in India, 2005 was when the BJP was in power, and this is when the novel was initially published. Now, Rimi Chatterjee uses the novel to extrapolate the majoritarian and militaristic tendencies implicit in the policies of the NDA-led government, which supports Hindutva. I use Dalit Futurism to analyze the novel by uncovering the relationship between caste ideologies in Hindutva and how its dominance impacts knowledge production. Here I want to add the caveat that this novel is not prophetic in nature. Rimi Chatterjee. Yes. Yes, I just want to add the caveat that this novel is not prophetic in nature, but only completes the arc of the present into the future. So my analysis incorporates the invented imaginary technologies mentioned here as novums and contextualizes their significance against the cultural background of Hindutva. Okay, so in the novel, Chatterjee speculates about the futuristic manifestations of Hindutva in 2020 by using Rahil Vidyadhar to represent Hindutva. Rahil is a Sanskrit scholar who has been employed by the center to interpret, quote, the scientific aspect of the shlokas, end quote. He suggests that the caste system is nothing more than a system of social division that helps to maintain coherence and discipline. He believes that the caste system is simply a structure to maintain social unity on the basis of difference. Therefore, there should be no mixing of, quote, substance through exogamy, end quote. This reason is used to justify not just divisions in society, but also hereditary occupations and their aptness according to the caste system, which compels people to know their place in the order. Here, the application of Dalit Futurism enables me to uncover this attempt to cloak the caste system on the basis of difference as benign Brahmanism, a term coined by Gajanan Ayuthara, which portrays caste as a painless and manageable form of social order and harmony. This does not consider the historical disadvantages suffered by the Dalits and the centuries of privileges accumulated by the upper caste. It reflects the ideologies of Hindutva ideologues like Dayanand Saraswati, Golwalkar, Hegdewar, and Savarkar, who we will be acquainted with in a little bit. The prescribed social divisions encapsulated in the Manusmriti and upheld by Hindutva are rigid and do not allow any Dalit to escape his caste identity or rise up in society. An ex-RSS activist, Bhanwar Meghvanshi, revealed that not only was he denied promotions as a Shakha Pramukh, but also experienced microaggressions throughout his time there. So this novel describes a future world wherein Hindutva has seamlessly been introduced into modern domains like education and research, and I suggest that Rahil's presence in the center is a glaring example of how knowledge production is often cloaked in casteist language and actively normalized. Rahil essentializes caste and occupation by referring to knowledge production as worship and therefore suited only to the Brahmins. One of the main tenets of uncovering non-neutrality of science is by examining the scientists. Here, Rennie Thomas's ethnographic study reveals that Indian scientists have a relationship of complementarity rather than conflict between science and religion. So Rahil's sermons on the scientific aspects of Hinduism in the entire novel during sermons that he conducts at the institute are an attempt to, quote, scienticize tradition and spiritualize science, end quote. There is a silo constructed around knowledge production that treats the activity as an abstract pursuit, sublime, exalted, and above reproach. Such a disconnect and enclosure around the activity protects the scientist from experiencing any ethical dilemmas about testing bioweapons on the Dalit villagers. Additionally, this hierarchization is magnified in lieu of the collusion between science and state, wherein the government often uses scientific progress to pitch the level of the nation's advancement. This one-dimensional relationship between the fictional center and the state reaches its apotheosis through the project Chakravyu, which will be so top secret even other members of the team won't know. Only the coordinator will have all the details of who's doing what, and no one will know even who he is. This kind of secrecy and desire to escape public scrutiny is evident in the nuclear projects carried out in India as well. The fictional enclosure of the research infrastructure replicates our empirical reality, especially the Baba Atomic Research Center's refusal to adequately respond to criticism on nuclear waste in the surrounding communities. Dalit Futurism enables me to analyze the structures that underlie the production of knowledge and technology. The analysis of this novel through Project Chakravyu and Imagined Technologies, Future Histories, and the defamiliarized alternate world allows the reader to introspect between the fictional and the real world. In another novel called Chosen Spirits by Samit Basu, which is a dark dystopian novel set in 2050s India and released in 2020 India, talks about extrapolates and exaggerates the events that led to the Citizenship Amendment Act 2019, both the protest as well as the government crackdown. The fictional world is replete with imaginary technologies that are embedded with caste biases and attitudes. These function again as novums, which are introduced into the market by upper caste businessmen who wish to maintain the status quo. Here, Dalit Futurism enables me to analyze how caste is deployed in two major ways. Firstly, by the amplification of the neoliberal economy that effectively sheaths caste ideologies. And secondly, how this facade is maintained through the media discourse and challenged by the marginalized through the same platform. This hegemony is ensured by controlling the public discourse through the flow verse, novum in the text, which is a 24/7 live platform that is the major source of news and entertainment, and can be compared to an amalgamation of social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Basu parodies the caste corporate entities by exaggerating the social capital and networks cultivated by the Savarnas, that is the Banyas, by creating the fictional access caste Brahmin, a group in the novel that has been able to convert their social capital and networks to cultivate, quote, 1-degree relationships with real power, end quote. This element signals the Brahmin-Banya nexus, first explained by Dr. Ambedkar as a symbiotic relationship between the educated Madras Brahmins, who were reporters and journalists, and the Banyas, who provided financial support to the newspaper organizations. By pointing out the importance of historical advantages accrued by the Brahmins, Ambedkar illustrates how the community has been able to readapt and refashion itself even as it acted internally in isolation. A study on Tamil Brahmins interprets this general prosperity as an, quote, art of power, end quote, cultivated through accumulated social and cultural capital, which allowed them to adapt their professions and perceive upcoming opportunities while withdrawing from extremely competitive ones. The success of Chopra, one of the characters in the novel, as an access caste Brahmin, makes caste visible in political and economic governance. The development of an app to sell the lower caste, immigrants, and climate change refugees, the development of an app to sell the lower caste, immigrants, and climate change refugees, challenges Rohit's beliefs in the contemporary manifestation of caste-ascribed occupations and the hindered access to the market experienced by Dalit-run businesses all explain how caste blocks Dalit entry in the neoliberal landscape. These social inequalities are orchestrated and maintained through media organizations that operate on the flowverse. The flowverse hosts multiple flow stars simultaneously and engineers multiple realities, a hyperbolized version of our contemporary reality, wherein AI algorithms on social media craft an exclusive feed that is in tune with our tastes, preferences, and attitudes, creating a unique reality only for ourselves, not accessible to even our friends. Initially, the flowverse was being used by the marginalized to highlight their opinions, but over time was seized by caste corporate entities. This is analogous to the Indian social reality, which was reflected in the abysmal coverage of COVID-19, incidents of caste atrocities, and the lopsided coverage that ignores Dalit issues or misrepresents them, indicating how news reportage has been compromised due to this nexus. The near-complete blackout of Dalit issues reflects the casteist mindset of mainstream media, also a result of effective representation, as regular studies have revealed that the lack of Dalits, Bahujans, and Adivasis in newsrooms. This state of affairs helps to contextualize Ambedkar's warnings about the Brahmin-Banya nexus in news organizations, as the latter would be swayed by profit, not well-being. However, there is a secret underground movement brought together by Dalit artists and other marginalized folks that challenges this establishment. The most prominent activists in the fictional world are E-Clav and Desi Bride, a multimedia artist who subvert and challenge dominant narratives through Ambedkar's ideas. E-Clav and Desi Bride reject the holiness and reverence accorded to Hindu gods and goddesses and instead privilege the ideals espoused in the Indian constitution. E-Clav and Desi Bride's protests are a reflection of the Ambedkarite ideology, which promotes modern, secular attitudes. I suggest that the performances enacted by these activists must not be considered to be solitary activities, but efforts to build a counterculture that foregrounds Ambedkar thought, educate, agitate, organize. By visibly inserting Ambedkarite ideology in their protest, E-Clav and Desi Bride locate oppression in caste-flavored neoliberalism. Thus, E-Clav and Desi Bride's protests are reminiscent of the multimodal strategies used by Dalit activists like Tenmoi Soundarajan, Anurag minus Verma, Meena Kandasamy, Anti-Caste Cat, and others who use an eclectic array of styles to present the Dalit perspective and challenge the neglect accorded by the mainstream media by asserting their presence. These artists intervene in the perception of a single reality and highlight how caste privileges creates a reality that erases the struggles of the marginalized from their feed. Over the past few years, the need, recognition, and thirst for anti-caste futures has steadily grown in clamor. It has grown in literature, art, and even film. Now, for instance, take a look at this work. This is by artist Oshin Shiva, who I occasionally work with and will continue working with in the future as well. Oshin fuses their Tamil Dalit heritage with tech, placing the head at the center while everything else looks on. So I use these works to explore how artists use Dalit Futurism to create and produce works that are deeply personal and political. This work brings together Tamil symbolism, nature, and tech in a manner that opposes and fuses disparate elements together. The armored sleeves and the sharp, unconventional swords, surrounded by bright, otherworldly flowers, is reminiscent of posters that idealize Hindu gods and goddesses. However, there is nothing dainty or pastel-hued about this work. It is assertive, it is angry, and it attempts to build a repository of Dalit counter-mythologies that portrays caste, tech, and culture as cohabitating entities. The cosmos is not a separate entity. It coexists with other elements in the work. This character is an otherworldly warrior who seems to be memorialized in this particular image. These works initiate a decentering of the Western as well as the Brahminical systems of power with people and nature. Thus, Dalit Futurism forwards a world building that centers resistance by building an alternative vocabulary. This analysis suggests that South Asian futurisms need to privilege decolonization and de-Brahminization to systematize a politics of hope and emancipation for all marginalized communities in the region. This brings me finally to the planned workshop. Now, in recent years, the popularization of Hindutva has ramped up the popularization of Vinayak Damodar Savarkar as well. He is considered to be one of the founding members of the Hindutva ideology. Now, proponents of Hindutva claim that Savarkar abhorred the caste system and called for its demise. However, a closer and critical reading suggests that this view requires a more nuanced approach. So Savarkar's letters and activism reveal that he denigrated the caste system, but a closer reading reveals that he perceived caste practices as separate from Hinduism. So he advocated for interdining and intermarriage without adequately addressing how endogamy tied into Hinduism. Thus, according to Savarkar, caste divisions prevented a Hindu unity, which was important to be maintained against Muslim domination, a cause that played into the British Raj's divide and rule policy, and also what he promised the British Raj when he sent the clemency applications. So in 1929, Savarkar composed a poem called Sutak Yogache Fitle, which is the English translation is that an eon of mourning is over, celebrating the Sri Vitthal Ratnagiri temple opening its doors to the Dalit community. And in a prefatory note, the editor of his poetry collection noted that a young man named Shivu Bhangi sang it while climbing up the step of the temple with the permission of a gathered assembly, and as he climbed the last step of the temple was met with applause that resounded into the heavens. In Hinduism, the concept of Sutak is suffused with Brahmin doublespeak, meaning that it means that you are temporarily impure and therefore untouchable because of a death in the family. It is again observed as a period of impurity and mourning, but Brahmins recover from this impurity in 10 days and other castes take longer. So, Sutak Fitne or Sutak Sutne refers to the return to normalcy in two ways, getting past the prescribed grieving period and regaining touchability. The rules about mourning and bereavement were codified in the Manusmriti and were maintained by Brahmin priests. Let's read the poem. You all have a copy of it as well. And this is written in the voice and perspective of a Dalit's entry into the temple. So, you allowed us entry to God's door, a great favor you have bestowed. By touching this unclean forehead and bestowed a boon, you have sullied your pure hands. You cleansed our impure feet and cleansed our destiny imprinted on our forehead. You are the son of Dharma. How may I describe you? I touch your shadow. You brought into the world an impure village, and out you went into villages. You Hindus have brought us, Hindus, close. The eon of cosmic impurity is undone, and the contamination enshrined through destiny is undone. An age of quarrel has ended. The enemy's trap has been broken. We, who have been slaves for centuries, are now colleagues. You have bestowed a great honor, a great favor. So, Savarkar suggests that untouchability as a practice could be discarded just as Sutak can be discarded. So, Savarkar's critique of the caste system, regardless of the tone deafness in this entire poem, Savarkar's critique of the caste system conceals the deep societal discrimination it actually engenders. It seeks to produce an ethnic nationalism without adequately challenging the divisions impeding national unity. Now, this uncritical acceptance of Savarkar's visualization by the mainstream needs a revision. Is temple entry and interdining the basis of a resistance movement? How do we build alternatives to the world currently being championed in India? How do we use science and tech not as symbols and systems that distress and discriminate, but as machines to subvert? I would like to begin our narrative with this powerful quote by R.T. Samuel, one of the editors of Blaft, who suggests that Ambedkar's writing is speculative in the truest sense. Because what if everything you've been taught about yourself and your origins is wrong? What if you could defy millennia of tradition, thought, and preordination to make your world anew and leap into the future? She reiterates, anti-caste storytelling and thinking, dreaming, mobilizing, and working is speculative by nature. In one sense, our communities have had the most practice at speculation about the future, about resistance, and towards liberation. So how do you think caste could evolve in the future? What would be its manifestations and influences in 2070 AD? How do we reimagine and rewrite futures that the mainstream discourse insists we occupy? An antithesis to Savarkar's vision is one suggested by Sant Ravidasa. The regal realm, by Sant Ravidasa, called Seeking Begumpura. The regal realm with the sorrowless name, they call it Begumpura. A place with no pain, no taxes or cares, nor own property there, no wrongdoing, worry, terror or torture. Oh my brother, I've come to take it as my own, my distant home, where everything is right. That imperial kingdom is rich and secure, where none are third or second, all are one. Its food and drink are famous, and those who live there dwell in satisfaction and in wealth. They do this or that, they walk where they wish. They stroll through fabled palaces unchallenged. Oh, says Ravidasa, a tanner now set free, those who walk beside me are my friends. So let's reimagine. What is the name and the timeline of a fictional society? How does caste evolve in this fictional society? What is the turning point in this fictional society that we create? What are the foundational principles of social justice and equality? What are the parameters of science and technology that help us reimagine our futures as politics of hope and emancipation? Thank you. I think you can... Thank you. Should we start the workshop or... Do you have, if anybody has questions? Yes.
This thing.
Thanks so much, Preeti. That was an amazing presentation and so much to think about. So can you just, this idea of novum,
Yeah, so...
can you just explain it
yes,
a little bit more?
Yes,
Sorry.
I know, it's like the science fiction geek come to life. So basically in science fiction criticism, the novum is considered to be any pseudo-scientific invention. So like a hyperloop or flying cars or something like a taser back in the 70s was considered to be a pseudo-scientific invention. So novums are basically things that don't exist yet, but could potentially exist in the future. One of the ways in which I have changed it a little bit is not just to refer to these technological devices, but potentially how could, say, something like Hindutva look like in 2050. And it's taking whatever we have right now into the future, looking at whether it gets exaggerated, whether the intensity reduces. So it's not just the devices, it's also the social forces, the political forces, and how they could also change in the future. Yeah.
So is there a limitation to how we can imagine the future?
Absolutely no limitation. Absolutely no limitation to how you can imagine the future. So, should we start the workshop immediately or?
I mean, do you want us to kind of engage with Savarkar's and Hindutva ideology?
Sorry?
I mean, because you gave us, Savarkar's ideas and so on, so you, it's almost like, you're spanning over 100 years, of thought. And that has evolved in complex ways. Do you want us to draw back on that, or are we free to?
So, in previous iterations of this workshop, which is what we did the past, I think, couple of years, we looked at art, we looked at storytelling, visual storytelling, and as a non-artist, even I found that to be a little easier because it's so much more easy to paint something and have it represent so many different things. As part of the workshop design, what I want us to do now is to put our heads together and imagine something put our ideas together in terms of how would the ideological principles of this future world look like? How does social justice or equality look like in the future? Do you think caste has been obliterated completely and it is an allyship-based politics that we are working with, or are we looking at identity/allyship? It's completely up to you how you think about this particular world in the future in 2070 AD. What I wanted to do with that particular poem that we read out of Savarkar's is the temple entry. The temple is considered to be the main focal point of how Hindutva imagines everyone else to be. In the future, do we transform this temple entry into something else? Do we replace the temple with the constitution? Do we replace it with some idea and look at how the world and the people or the divisions would look like from that particular idea? So what I want us all to do, and I will also be part of this, what I want us all to do is to write up how our future society looks like. How do societal divisions look like? Are we looking at only caste? Are we looking at gender? Are we looking at sexuality? What are we looking at? Because this is also a way for us to reflect not just on caste as it exists today, not just on divisions as they exist today, but also divisions as they might exist in the future if the present tendencies continue. And if we don't want the present tendencies to continue, what could be the focal point? What would be the event that changes it all? It doesn't have to happen, it's not prophetic, but it's just something that we can also think for ourselves when we imagine resistance, when we imagine our personal resistance, when we imagine our personal to political resistance. So that is what I want. And we could start, okay, it's not changing now. Adam, the previous slide. Yeah. So we could start by looking at the evolution of caste and society and the turning point in our fictional society. So we could do like 3, or we could do 1. 3 tables, 3 stories, or...
You want communal stories or individual stories?
I wanted...
Table stories?
Team stories.
Team stories. Oh, you want team stories. Oh, okay. Group work. Yeah, absolutely. Group work. Wonderful. And do you want to maybe also go back to the 2070?
Yes.
Because I think it's quite useful that we have this anchor, right? Because in the last workshops, we wildly changed it, and we realized the further we went into the future, kind of futures were faltering. Imagination was faltering. So I think this is a nice anchor for us to kind of have a similar goal in mind in terms of time passing. How long would you like us to work on it?
This is, I think we have 1 hour, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, 1 hour, yeah.
Excellent.
Yes,
Thank you
I'll
very much.
walk around a little bit as well.
Okay, make sure we keep working, thank you.
So are we going to write up or says art?
Right up. Words are far more difficult.
Hi everyone. Welcome to 2070 AD. This is the production from Alan, Anandi, Basma, and Priti. She was part of our group, so don't even tell her. So with regards to this particular workshop, we have named this space in 2070 as The Garden. Not that it was inspired by the Garden of Eden, no, but we just wanted to say the garden because it still has got the greenness, the richness, the vibrancy, the emotion, the empathy, and everything else that's beautiful in it. The flowers, the animals. This will be a classless society that's with unrestricted mobility, unjudgmental, no accents, no IDs, no color, no caste, no borders, no nations, no passports, just celebration. The background matters in an inspiring way. I just wanted to say no caste, but original ID for the society. What we intended was, I will maintain my Zimbabweanness. You will maintain your Indianness. Tom will maintain his Britishness. But we'll still be able to live together in harmony, in beautiful peace. On the communication, there won't be need for a common language. Everyone just understands each other empathetically. Pathetically. Work. It won't be a capitalist society. Everybody can work on their craft without the pressure of money. The politics. There will be a governing body elected by the people, for the people, roving positions that anyone is eligible for, limited time span, so anyone who wants to go into governance will be able to join that governing body. These people won't have any special powers. They will just be like any other ordinary Alan in the street, or Alan in the forest, or Alan in the hills, or Alan in the city. Technology. God, I love my voice. Hey. Sorry. Okay, technology. We will be advanced people, but still remain human and humane. The landscapes will have our cities where there will be lots of activities, but there will also be green lands where there's grass, animals, trees, snakes. Sorry, I had to put snakes. I hate snakes, but I still want to see them. And now the timeline. Unfortunately, there has to be a zombie apocalypse between 2050 and 2060. This will be called the chaos era. And only the humans that are left within this period, they will have to live together with one another in unity and in harmony. Thank you.
All right. It's interesting, we all have a kind of Marxist socialist idea of the future. Okay. Ready? So first I want to explain my collective's creative process. We came up with basically a list of characteristics we wanted 2070 to have. And then we thought about how we might build the paragraph around it. We failed utterly to do that. So what we did was we fed that list of features, of characteristics, into an AI. And it generated this paragraph for us, which we thought was cool, so we will read it, okay? Ironically, one of our future characteristics was to have no AI. So in this imagined future that AI wrote for us, it would not exist. But I'm a poet, so those contradictions are normal. The comparative biologies class hummed with low-frequency vibrations as the man on the birthing platform shuddered, his abdomen splitting open in a painless, practiced motion, a gift, not a wound. The goat kid slid into the world, damp and bleating, its dark eyes already reflecting the room's bioluminescent fungi. The class debated, child or food? Both, of course. The man would nurse it, name it, and when the time came, consume it, just as the goat, in its next iteration, might one day consume him, their energies cycling back into the net zero ecology. No one owned anything, not even their own bodies, which shifted form and function as needed. Today a human, tomorrow a mycorrhizal network. The new elite were those who could speak across species, who navigated the vast bureaucracy of fluid identities without stumbling. There were no white men here, no fixed genders, no AI, just the endless, meticulous exchange of skills, sentience, and flesh. Outside, the landscape pulsed with hybrid life, borders dissolved. Solidarity and security meant the rotation of roles. Today's birther was tomorrow's decomposer. Musk's worst nightmare, maybe. But in 2070, no one remembered who Musk was. And just to say, one of the characteristics we insisted on was we tried to imagine 2070 that would be Elon Musk's worst nightmare.
Short people. Yeah, I think this is fine. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yes. For moral support. Yeah.
They said that.
Yeah. It's okay. Yeah. Hello. Hi. So we had a really big debate about what our society should be like, and I think those were really important debates. And I first started with a very dystopian notion of what 2070 would be like. I was just like, now if caste is so subtle now, how subtler could it get in 2070? So, but then I started, talking to Mrigakshi and also Neeraj and Jayan, and I realized maybe it won't be that bad, okay. But I eventually got into the optimistic side of the spectrum. We agreed on the name. I'm sorry, it's not as poetic as the other two groups. It's just me rambling about what our society will be like. So we imagined a society which is called commensalism, and Jayan suggested this word for our society, which is basically a biological term, which talks about how the non-human and the human are actually work towards benefiting each other. So I think that is a really important criteria of what our future society would look like. It's called commensalism, which is also called sahabhojita, which means dining together and living together. So this year, 2070, there has been so the events of 2027 are still fresh in the memories of all the people that are living in a single sector of commensalism. Commensalism is a society which is really large, and it does not have borders, and yes, no visas, no passports, everybody's free to go everywhere. But there are sectors, and there are people living in a village, in a microcosm of what commensalism is about. So the primary idea behind this commensalism is that both human and non-human have agreed or have come up with a self-awareness that we are actually made up of the same subatomic particles. Everybody is chaos and everybody is calm. For example, like Jayan so beautifully explained to us about how the subatomic reality in the cosmos, in the larger cosmos, is the same as the one within us. So we have come to this awareness that we are all the same, and therefore there is no hierarchy in this society. And that is the entire idea behind this society. And as Mrigakshi also suggested, that birds still chirp and the bees still buzz, and it is full of life, and also of the science that has made life possible. Science in this world is not something to be afraid of. Science has helped us make the recovery from the apocalyptic events that has taken place in 2027. So we have used science as a helping tool that has helped us recover from the apocalyptic events, and it has made our life much easier. There is no anxiety between scientific advancement and human advancement. We have learned to help each other throughout, and we are dependent each other for each other's development. So this is what commensalism is about, and each microcosm is made up of this ideology. So this is what our 2070 would look like. Thank you. Yes, she has something to add.
Yeah, I'll just add. Sorry. Yeah, I'll just add that our ideas were inspired by Adivasi philosophy, and we want to go back to that idyllic past. Yeah, so which finds mention in many of the books we read about people who have written about the idyllic past. So that and also we refer to Annibal Quijano, who discusses how we have to look back in order to look our conception of modernity should be when we can look back to the past. So it should what can I tell? Yeah. So we should look back first rather than think like our future should be about
like
the
she
past
says,
also.
Yeah, like our future should come with an awareness of the past,
yes.
so that we can be better in the future.
Yes, yes. Sorry, I got nervous. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much. These are wonderful futures. Thank you for participating, thinking through about what you want the future to look like, reflecting. It also helps us reflect a little bit about our own self, right? We are able to take a step back and think about our place within this particular world. So thank you for playing along. Now, because this is, again, an iteration of a workshop that we've been working on for a while, I just wanted to ask if you could fill out this feedback form as well.
So, well, thank you all for your hard work in the first session. Now, in the second session, you can just lean back and watch this beautiful play, DaklaKatha DeviKavya by Jangama Collective. Unfortunately, Lakshmana KP and Mohit Kaycee couldn't join us in person. They were invited, and we actually thought they were going to be able to come, but all kinds of things stood in the way. Maybe certain things that we might actually address in the roundtable afterwards. When I asked them whether they wanted to introduce the play, they said no, right? So I'm going to honor their wish, and I'm not going to introduce the play either, but we'll have plenty of time to discuss it with them. They'll be joining us on Zoom. Yeah, so instead of introducing the play, which apparently needs no introduction, right, but it has plenty of after-screening discussion, I just wanted to say a few words about Jangama Collective, which is a Bangalore-based group of theatre artists with diverse cultural backgrounds who believe in creating cultural and political awareness, choosing theatre as their way of expression. And we have actually, Judith had met them quite a long time ago in Bangalore, then they were invited to Adi Shakti. We recently, Niraj recently screened a film by one of the members of the Jangama Collective. So they are really a fabulous group, and they've given us a bio of every member of their group, which you can find online. But I'm only going to give you a short bio of the members that we're going to see on Zoom later on. So there's Lakshmana KP, founder member of Jangama Collective, an actor, director, poet, and performance educator from Karnataka. He graduated from the Intercultural Theatre Institute in Singapore in 2018 and from Ninasam Theatre Institute in 2012. He's been exploring questions around Dalit aesthetics and performance, and his two recent plays, We the People of India and DaklaKatha DeviKavya, explore intersecting questions about Dalit political modernity and cultural memory in fascinating ways. And the other member who's going to be joining us is Mohit Kaycee, who is currently a PhD candidate in the anthropology of religion at Columbia University. He previously worked at India Foundation for the Arts and the Center for the Study of Social Exclusion and Inclusive Policy at National Law School in Bangalore. Since 2012, Mohit had been closely associated with the Kotinagala Ramaya, and his work in pedagogy and performance at Terahali Hill in Kola. Judith also met him and met the group there. So he's doing fascinating work as part of his PhD, and we're really privileged that they actually managed to join us later. So hopefully everything goes well with Zoom. But for now, I just want you to kind of enjoy the play. It's about roughly 1 hour and 40 minutes. So as I said, if you want to get a drink quickly while the light is still on a little bit, please do so. Make yourself comfortable. And afterwards, you will be expected to ask very probing and interesting questions. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for watching the play. And we're sorry we can't be with you in person for various reasons, but this was a great way, I guess, that since we weren't there, you got to watch the play again in its full detail. And I'm just this morning was reflecting back on that journey because I think it's been close to 2.5 years now, I think, Lakshman. And I remember in the last few days of the rehearsal process, Judith had come in with Du Saraswati and others and seen this kind of play just coming together at that point. And it was a very interesting process for Lakshman, me, the entire, because we went so much with an instinctual process of reading that at that point when Judith came in and others came in, uh, we weren't very sure whether people are going to understand or what their response or their experience of it is going to be. So at one level, people were coming in and recognizing things that were familiar with, the history of Dalit literature in Karnataka. But at the same time, I remember there was this young boy who was from the tea stall right next to where we were auditioning, rehearsing, and he came in and he kept coming back for each round of rehearsal. And he which was, I think, our first signal that the play really has a larger audience. And I'm talking about that young boy right now because 2.5 years since the play premiered, it really took us also by surprise in the sense of the way that people received it and the kind of places that it screened at. And I wanted to also reflect on this process, what that began, the play really began for us and for Lakshman in particular, because since then he has worked on another very popular play called Bob Marley from Kodehalli, where he reflected on the poetry of another writer who was associated with the Karnataka Dalit Sangharsh Samiti, that's N.K. Hanumantaya, and his recent work, which is in Germany right now, reinterpreting Friedrich Schiller's Love and Intrigue, but putting that in dialogue and conversation with Devnur Mahadeva's Kusuma Bale. So I just want to recognize that time since this play premiered 2.5 years back has been really momentous. And thank you for giving us an opportunity to reflect back on it after this time. Um, and so maybe I have a question for Lakshman, which is, uh, can you tell us, and some of us know, but for the room in general, can you tell us what drew you back to a text like DaklaKatha DeviKavya? Because prior to that, you had been working and learning theater in Singapore, where you were experimenting with a range of different practices, including no theater and Kuriyatam, but also you were very interested in European forms. You were reading Camus, and you've had this huge kind of exposure. And what brought you back to something that was written maybe hours away from where you were born and is situated in that geographical landscape?
Yeah. Firstly, thank you everybody for watching the play. Of course, it's very different watching it on screen than watching the play in real physically. I mean, as Mohit mentioned, yeah, I was very much attracted to European absurdist theater. I was fan of Beckett, Ionesco, and all that, and the theater of the double, and many things. But when I was studying in Singapore in 2016, right after I joined the course, there was this incident, like everybody, the whole country knows about it. Rohit Vemula's institutional murder that happened there, and that really disturbed me, but I didn't know what to do with it. And every time I started reading that letter, Rohit Vemula's letter, I couldn't finish reading it. It was very tough for me. But end of my course, I did a small piece called Fireflies using Rohit Vemula's letter as a core text. And now I'm looking back to it, that play, a solo performance, looked like a funeral. It looked like a funeral. It also looked like a ritual. And after that, like I did like there was something that was happening for me internally, and I was also struggling to find my own language, theatrical language, and also construct a body, a physical body of performance, which really comes from my own lived experience. And even after I came back from Singapore after 2018, even though I did that piece on Rohit Vemala's letter, and again I went back to do lots of Beckett plays, Waiting for Godot, and like Ionesco's The Leader, and some other plays I did. But like, but I was very scared to go back to my village because of all the violence that I had witnessed as a kid, and I really literally escaped from my village. But it was very like I don't know how that happened. It was very coincidental. The day KB Siddhaya passed away, I was in Tumkur. That is where he lived, KB Siddhaya. And I knew as a kid, I remember listening to his songs. People used to sing in my village in protests and all that, which is like Inada Manninalli. It's there in the play also. Inada Manninalli, all about the people. It is a famous song. I knew this person, KB Siddhaya, as this person who has written this song. And I had read nothing of his poetry or prose, anything like that. But I went there, and like so many people gathered there, like some thousands of people, and everybody started to sing that song. It was like a collective mourning, collective like lament of some kind of grief that was performed there. That really like I couldn't process it properly intellectually, and that made me to go back to Siddhaya to read him in detail. And I started reading his prose, maybe because of the language and the way he writes and the vocabulary he uses, which is very close to where I grew up. And I was drawn to it. I was very drawn to it, and I could relate lots of things with him. And what I was searching for through these absurdist theater, I found there. I found a different language there. And like I knew, but when I read like his poetry, I couldn't make sense of lots of things. But in a very intuitive level, I knew that this is what I wanted to do because that was resonating with the universe that I grew up with, and also that I was imagining in a way creatively. And like all the things that I learned in Singapore and even before that in a theater school, I realized that like those tools are not enough for me to construct a physicality to this text. And it was not just a text for me, it was like a codified language which opens up lots of things, lots of layers the moment you tap into it, the moment you touch it, the moment you recite it, the moment you entangle it with something else. And I could hear lots of music as I was listening to the poetry. I was reading to the poetry, and I could relate to lots of memories as a child that I had witnessed. And like there is this like Madiga ness that like Siddhaya talks about, like very constantly throughout his poetry, is one of the major untouchable castes in Karnataka. And even though I was not identifying myself as a Madiga person, but I could relate with it like in a very intuitive level. Because lots of stories my mother used to tell me, those were there in Siddha's poetry. Lots of rituals that I used to witness as a kid, those were there in Siddha's poetry. And that was really like that really like pulled me into the text. And I realized without these two instruments that you see in the play, one is arai and another one is tamate, which is also like called like played as parai in different parts of India, southern India. I was like, and these two instruments were very much part of my childhood. And all the rituals I had witnessed were with these instruments. I thought like the moment if I build, I construct the play with these instruments, then they would inform the physicality and the world of the play. That was the entry point for me. Very interesting entry point for me to like very personal, philosophical and political. And also I was struggling to find my conversation with my memories and my pain and humiliations. And I found a language through Siddhaya, where Siddhaya's poetry became a medium for me to express my own humiliations, like pains that I had gone through, hunger that I had gone through as a kid, as a person who lived in this village, which is very close to Siddhaya's place. Yeah.
I'll just maybe add a little bit to that, and then we can open up for questions. And I think I want to just add to what Lakshman was saying about music, because as someone who is witnessing, I think broadly, even over the last decade or so, the Dalit movement, and particularly certain kinds of cultural formations within the Dalit movement, one of which that Lakshman and me were both part of, which is Kotiganhalli Ramaya's theater effort and his cultural center 70 kilometers outside of Bangalore on a hill in Kolar. That there is this question around what you do with cultural forms, and with percussion there has been a kind of a history with that, where there was a moment in which the Dalit Sangharsh Samiti rejected, because of its association with certain kinds of forced labor practices and certain ritual forms. It kept the drums really away from the political movement. And while we were rehearsing, the two of the actors who play those instruments, they had two very different stories, because we went, to both of one of their villages and spoke to the family, and they're two very different experiences with that instrument. So for one, it was extremely empowering in a sense that he had experienced a kind of social veneration because of his role as a player of that instrument, along with systematic discrimination. But for the other, it was mostly the discrimination. So there were both sides existing simultaneously. And around the same time that the play premiered, Pinpapanalli Munivenkatappa, who's one of the great performers of the tamte instrument, he received the Padma Shri, of course, by the Modi government. But at that point, there was a question of how to celebrate that moment, and we had a huge gathering at the heart of Bangalore to venerate Pinpapanalli Munivenkatappa and to celebrate his recognition with whatever complication that involves. And I remember Kotiganhalli Ramaya talking about how they had, in a sense, ignored the power of the instrument and hadn't heard what the instrument was saying, what kind of truth it was speaking, or what kind of language it embodied. And there's a word in Kannada called nudi, which is often used to talk about, speech, talk about utterance, talk about language itself. And the instrument also has a nudi. So there was, and Ramaya is very interested in this history where that instrument is so powerful that if it can evoke gods, then what can it do for a political movement? What can it do for a sense of self, sense of creative and artistic experimentation? And I think Lakshman, in that process of creating DaklaKatha DeviKavya, showed what was possible with that language of drums, where they kind of emerge as characters and overlap with the dialogue of the play and kind of reach back into this kind of cosmogonic kind of memory, in a sense. So I think we've taken up a lot of time already with this, but we'd like to hear some questions and some comments.
So, well, thank you both so much. And I mean, I loved watching the play, right, live. It was just such an amazing experience. But this was also really useful, right? I felt I watched it in a more kind of cerebral way. I thought I wanted to. But then the drums took over, right? The are and the tamte took over. And their voices are just such an integral part, right? So I love the fact that you talked about this, and again, you're in a different realm altogether, right? It's almost, you're not really taking it in kind of just sort of rationally, it's a whole full-bodied experience. So thank you that it, even through the screening, that came across really clearly. But I'm going to open up for questions now. Who wants to be first? Who's got the mic? So, well, you can see them really small.
I can wave my hand. Can you hear me? I'm here. Thank you, Lakshmana and Mohit. I should go there? Yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind. Yeah.
Now they'll be bigger. Sorry.
You can see me better now. Hi, Lakshmana. Mohit, thank you so much. That was a lovely experience watching it. The moment the play opened and then the first drum player, array player, talking about reading, immediately took me to Rohit and his letter, and that's the image, and the mother and the son, and the mother asking the son to study. It's what Paranjit says, for example, but it reminded me of that equation, and I think that came out even if you don't consciously meant to. It actually reminded me of him. And a couple of things, one question and a comment. Although you're inspired by the absurdist theater and the likes of Ionesco and Brecht, watching the play suggested watching a folk performance, a folk play on stage. Was it really conscious? Because particularly in the first act, let's say, be it invocating Jangama and the whole movement of characters singing and then describing and singing and describing, it's such a folk form. And then such folk forms, come on stage in this form, right? And secondly, the subtext, I'm still trying to understand what we were trying to do. Of course, the abstract says the constant debate between the written word and what is not written, the power position between it. I connected to the Tamil Dalit scenario, where in the 70s and 80s, Dalit movements refused to play Arai, the Tamil Parai, because it was attached to the stigma, and therefore Dalit activists said we won't play the drums in during the death funerals. We won't move the karkas. It was aligned on that. But now Parai has become this major instrument on stage, let's say. And there is that debate, and then here there's a debate between the written word and then the play is happening, right? And of course you sort of mention Ambedkar and invocate Ambedkar's vision and reading, but you also have going back to rituals. I say this again because in Tamil, whether to own the rituals or not was also a debate, right? And reading and modernity was placed binarically opposite. It was placed dichotomically opposite to that. And there is that debate. Now here, on one moment, you see that sort of an invocation outside to some extent, of what is happening there. But then also going back to the devotional, the ritual, the spiritual way. If what I say makes sense, please comment. Thanks.
No, thank you for your observation. I agree with you lots of things. Of course, I was influenced by absurdist theater, but this play is mostly influenced by Chindata of Telangana. The Sindh Madigas, they perform this style, and also the style of the performance, the community that we are referring to, Daklas, they themselves are performers. And they perform this to different communities, and they're performers, they're healers, and everything. And your question with being owning the rituals and these parade drumming at the same time, having conversation with the modernity, should we keep it or not? For me, I feel like Tamte, for me, it's not an ancient art, just it's a modern language. And at the same time, for me, I wouldn't say see, the words and the letters are so new to this community. And where is the knowledge of this community is? If I start to question myself that, I think it is there in the drums, it is there in the language that we use, it is there in the rituals we do. And we no need to, I feel like we no need to look at these rituals in the in the conventional language of rituals, God and all that. These communities, I feel like their their conversation with the human, their conversation with trees or plants or animals or and gods, they're not very hierarchical. They're very horizontal. They can jump into different realms very easily. I think that is the power of these communities, and the power of creativity that these communities have been practicing for very long. And what really dangerous and trap that I think sometimes Dalit movement followed and fell into is the leftist idea of culture, which is very, for me, being rational, being logical, and being very in a way scientific is very limited for me, because Dalit communities, their idea of rationality, it's very different than what we say scientific temper and all that. And also the radicalism that, if you look at a folk tale, it is rational, radical, imaginative, it is everything at the same time. So that's why for me, this play, I wanted it to be like a folk tale. You will not understand a folk tale really. Like, one cannot understand a folk tale and will not go for the moral thing of the of a story. We go for the experience. At the same time, through telling these stories, claiming our knowledge, which is not doesn't just come from the words itself, by our living and our practices, our ethics and moralities, I think I want all this for the modern imagination. Yeah, I really want all this for the modern imagination. I need all this. I need Parai. I need words. I need technology. I need AI to really to imagine something like very futuristic. Yeah, that's how I see it. Yeah, I don't know whether I answered
Totally love
your
it.
not
Thank,
answered.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Lakshmana.
yeah.
Just add maybe just very quickly to that, because I think what you're talking about in terms of I'm not so familiar with the Tamil context, but in Karnataka there's a very particular moment I think that begins in 1984 and then continues till 1995, where there is a fragmentation of the Dalit Sanghar Samiti, and this opens up, I think, a space for a lot of its leaders to embark on certain kinds of ethnographic, creative experiments. And so, for example, uh, Dr. Sidlingaya, who's associated with this, kind of Marxist rationalism, his PhD is on village deities. It's called Grama Devtegalu. Koteganhalli Ramaya, he goes and he travels to Telangana and he's talking on the border regions between Karnataka and Andhra to a lot of these communities, the Sindata that Lakshman was talking about. And there's this really, and for example, Devnur Mahadeva, he begins Kusuma Bale with an invocation to Male Madappa, who's this Dalit saint figure who there's an oral epic composed about his life. So I'm picturing all of these figures in late at night listening to storytellers, listening to musicians, and there's this beautiful image that I sense where they have begun this process of listening, and in the way that they weren't allowed during the period that they were constructing the movement, and certain truths, certain new imaginations start emerging from this process of listening, which then they try in many ways, in scholarly ways, like we see with Dr. Sidlingaya and Ramaya, try to think about it through the history of sociology and anthropology and those disciplines, but at the same time, they don't limit it to an academic exercise. They are writing plays and they're reimagining. So what Lakshman is talking about, this dichotomy between, a past and a future, or between rationality and traditionalism, I don't think that exists for them, because they like, for example, with KB Siddhaya's text that we've just watched, his cosmogony is drawn from within folk performance traditions, but it's also an Ambedkarite cosmogony. It's also a feminist cosmogony. So in some ways, that this dichotomy, which D.R. Nagaraj in some ways created, about this idea that there's a school of social rage and then there's a school of spiritual striving. In some ways, I don't think that dichotomy is useful in trying to understand at least the Kannada Dalit writers and creative practitioners.
Oh, thank you so much. That was great. Who wants to ask the next question? Are you? Excellent. She's coming. Rigakshi is going to talk to you now.
Hi, this is Megakshi. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, so congratulations and thank you for screening the play for us. And I think it was really powerful, and the actors were like, they did fabulous job. And I think we already discussed a lot of things. So yeah, but I really want you to reflect a bit more on the meta-narrative elements that are present in the play, where we as audience also get to think and reflect on how this is, after all, a play that we are watching. And it also adds comic relief, I would say, to the whole narrative. So if you could discuss a bit more about the elements that are present, like the meta-narrative elements that are there. So yeah, I know you are inspired by absurdist theater, and yeah, I felt like I was watching an absurdist play. But yeah, if you could comment a little more on that. Yeah. Thank you.
Mohit, you want to go on? Like, you can talk on the meta narratives, then I can add.
Maybe this is a point just to reflect on this idea of, when we were looking recently, revisiting the play, this idea really struck me of how there's a web of relationships in the play. It begins with the invocation of seven goddesses who are kind of integrated into a certain kind of ecology, and then when the whole cosmogony starts unfolding, you get a different sense. There is this question of the human aspect of menstruation, how that's connected with the creation of the world itself. And there is a relationship between communities. For example, the two communities who play the two drums are the left and the right. So that is also part of a kind of cosmogonic history. And then this is mapped onto the question. Gender is really strong in the play. It begins with that question of menstruation, but then there are so many moments in the play in which uh, it is taken on at a very human and personal level. Lakshman's weaving of Siddhaya's autobiographical elements kind of is the goddess his mother, in some ways. Or so maybe I'm going to deflect this back onto Lakshman. And I remember we were talking about this web of relationships, and you said that something that holds it all together is the question of hunger. Can you reflect on how do you think hunger really holds all that together?
Yeah, I think the hunger is the core element of the play. And because I think, the play starts with this guy who cannot read, but who is an expert in playing the drum, and which we don't see it as knowledge, don't see it as something that. And but his mother's desire, for me, that also I look at it as hunger, for her son to read and write. It become a question of hunger for me. And if you keep on going with the play, then it extends to the part where like they go in search of food, And they're like whatever this, see, whenever, if you look at all these Vedic traditions and blah 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 blah, the whenever somebody asks for a boon, it is they ask for power. They want to own a this thing, this what is that, yeah, something, some weapons they want to fight, to kill. But here it's not that. It's like they ask for very minimal thing. It's food and some drink, some alcohol. And like the individual hunger, for me, in the text itself, it develops as a hunger of the community itself. The community itself, and like that whole lake which turns into toddy, and also like the whole bank of the lake which turns into meat, it's not enough to fulfill the hunger. And for me, that really, it talks about the generational hunger that has been existed there for quite long. And they fight for it. He's keep on drinking and they get high. And there's one more part that we have not done in the play. It's not there in the play. Later, once this Daklappa gets drunk and everything, and he gets all the meat and he throws it to all the animals and birds and everything, and dances on the hill. Like he dances literally. And like it's the quite like the hunger and the celebration of it in a way. And the saddest part is like it happens in an imaginative space. In real, still they're struggling for food. It reflected once he comes back and he asks his wife, is there anything to eat? It suddenly jumps from the imagination to the real world, where like her baby is sick and this guy is back home and he's asking for food and she's helpless. And the helplessness in Dakla also turns into aggression, violence, and like hunger, which connects everything together. This hunger for dignity, and like that's why they look at the stories that he tells to his kids. And like he talks about, for me, all the historical things that he shares, they go like that. They quickly pass. Like Gandhi passes so quickly, and like Basaveshwara passes so quickly. And all, like, even when he's talking about Gandhi, he's talking about hunger. He can do all this fasting because he has food other days, he can choose to fast. But some people cannot choose to fast. Like it's a day-to-day reality. And that's why for him it becomes so important to tell his kids that, like, you forget whatever you want, don't forget Ambedkar. And he calls him Odappa. And like he know that there's a future in, like, for this community to fulfill their hunger for dignity, fulfill their hunger for life, their everything. It comes from there. And for me, that's why it gets very modern, from very, like, very maternitical, like matriarchal space to. And for me, Ambedkar becomes this matriarchal figure, through, like, as he says that. And like to understand hunger, to understand dignity, to understand pleasure and celebration, Ambedkar becomes this modern medium, modern lens to understand all these things. That's what, like, that's how I look at it. That's how I look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your answer. I think it was very immersive. At the same time, it was very intensive. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you want to come? Anandi is coming. Anandi Rao from SOAS.
Hi, thank you so much. It was really interesting, and like I think the topic of food and, as you said, hunger was such a connective point. I have some, like, I don't know, really maybe basic questions, like where was this performed and where was it filmed? Sorry, it's like that level of questions. Because it's so interesting. Like, I watch a lot of theater, and watching a filmed version of a play is so interesting because, like, in a way, you're guiding us. Like, whoever's filming is like kind of guiding us in a certain way in which the live performance, we guide ourselves. So I was just wondering where it was performed and where it was filmed. And then like just audience responses to the live version and perhaps the film version, like what have they been? And yeah.
Yeah, this particular copy that you have seen, it was performed in Rangashankara in Bangalore in a theater. Yeah, that's where it is. It was shot also. I mean, the response to the live performance and the recordings are very different, because and this performance, that like even like when we perform in theaters, the response is very different. When we perform in Mumbai or Bangalore, these kind of metropolitan cities, is different. When we perform in villages, is very different. And we have been performing this play in very like different kind of spaces, from village to small towns to like in jatres, in fairs. Like we have performed like in different places. And it's also very interesting to, we also performed this play for the Kala communities. And that was the best show that I've seen, I think, with the community. And they, I think, the way they celebrated the play, that was very interesting for me to see. And they felt they're represented in on the rightly, and they came on stage and they started to talk about their place. It was a small group of people in Chiknaiknalli, or like village, which is like some 130 kilometers from Bangalore. And people have been like responding like with lots of criticism, also with lots of like admiration, with lots of confusions, with lots of inspiration. Yeah, it's been very different, and like it's been very different and various in each place when we perform, and each place when we see it, when we showcase it, it's very different.
Thank you. Do we have another question? Hi, it's Megan. I think I had loads of questions, but I think you've answered them all. Thank you. I mean, your answers were so generous, and I mean, I think I now understand that what I thought I didn't understand, I actually did understand it, the way you wanted it to be understood, which is kind of reassuring. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about your current projects and your future projects?
I mean, after DaklaKatha, I feel like it's a continuous trajectory that I'm going in. And in Bob Marley, again, I went back to this myth. There's this Mariamma myth, which talks about this Madiga boy who goes to a Brahmin's house to learn and conceals his caste, and he learns and he falls in love with this upper caste girl. And they get to know about his caste because his mother comes to see him, and they're having food, and like they have given them all the vegetarian food. And this woman, like, she cannot resist, and she makes this comment like, I have eaten all this vegetarian food, but I didn't feel like I had a bone marrow, that reveals everything. And also Bob Marley, it's set in a very modern context where three young Dalit characters who live in a city in Bangalore and concealing their caste because they know that they will not get a house if they reveal their caste. But their caste is revealed because a dog downstairs has taken the bone to the next house, and which reveals their caste. They got to know that these people have been eating meat, and now they are forced to leave the house. And there's this conversation between these three to understand their identities and understand their past and understand their experiences in the village and understand their life now through that lens. That is Bob Marley. And like this Bob Marley name itself is coming from this guy who didn't wanted to share his name with anybody, so he has named himself as Bob Marley, so he can hide his identity. And he works in a bar as a bartender, and who mixes alcohol and who also plays music. And that was my the play that I did.
You write that as well?
Yeah. I wrote it with like I also like it was influenced by one of the poet called N.K. Hanumantaya, like very prominent poet in Kannada literature. And the story that Chandrasekhar, like who did like the Song of the Ghetto film. So like his short story, it influenced by that, and I developed it. It's a comedy. It's a like dark comedy that is. We have been performing that show, and like now the play that I'm doing, it's called Still I Choose to Love. So here I wanted to like address, I think now onwards, at least for the next 1-2 plays, I just want to focus on this idea of love and belonging. And I mean, like the caste system, it's such a dangerous thing. I feel like caste really makes people, it becomes too difficult to love. That's what Rohit Vemula also says. It makes people not to love each other. And the barriers that we have to love each other, like within the caste, like different castes, intercaste, like love becomes like this kind of strange thing where like you like it's not so easy. It becomes complicated and more complicated, and that is what that I am addressing in this place. Still, I choose to love. But like I'm so proud and like surprised for centuries of oppression that have been going through. But still, all these communities, they always choose to love. They've never taken a path to hate people. They've never taken this language of hatred. They could easily taken it. But like I'm surprised by the fact that they always choose love. And my ancestors are like there's such a like I feel so proud because they never taught us how to hate people. They always taught us how to love people. I'm not saying in the context of they were all saints, but in a very human level, they were all lovers, and they loved. They loved the land, and they loved every single thing that they lived with. And like that's why like that for me, the still I choose to love. It's not a very individualistic thing. Of course, it's individualistic. At the same time, it's a collective slogan that has been said underliningly throughout Dalit resistance. If not, these people could have killed so many people and in the rage and everything, but they didn't choose that. And that's why for me, like it's so important. See, again, I'm going back to Rohit Vimala's letter. There's not a tiny bit of bitterness in his letter. Even though he has gone through so much of that, he doesn't. I'm not saying rage is bad. I'm not saying anger is bad. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that what is that courage that really drives them to talk like this, to write like this, keeping love as their vision, love as their philosophy. And that is what really like this play is about. The still I choose to love. And in Kusuma Bale also, which if you look at the like even in DaklaKatha, even in Rohit Vemula's letter, even in like everything that we see, to the rage is also there to access love, the access inclusion. Like when like Sidlingaya who writes like this Ikrla Wadirla, like kick them, like peel on all that, that rage is it comes from this space where it demands love, it demands inclusion, it demands like dignity. That has been the I think that has been the trajectory. I think it's taking for me Daklakatha, the Siddhaya's text, and like after my engagement with Dalit literature in Karnataka, really opened up so many things for me. Not just for me, for whole Jangama Collective. Yeah, that has been the development. We want to go in this direction because also we see lots of young Dalit young Dalit people resonating with these kind of themes and plays and the songs, music and the politics. And there is something that very interesting about it. Like it is really keeping us feel very hopeful. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, I couldn't agree. I mean, You don't need me to agree, but I couldn't agree more. That's one of the things that astonishes me and draws me to, Dalit literature again and again. And because I come so much from the outside, but the love, the generosity, the compassion, right, beside the bubbling rage and this kind of, indomitable spirit is just so inspiring. But thank you. You put that so beautifully. Thank you. Judith, I think, wants to say something.
Yes.
Two questions. I have one.
We have more questions. Okay. Gopika is coming.
Hi.
Hello.
And hi, Mohit. Thank you so much, for the play and for the work that you're doing. You've spoken about so many ideas and so many issues that really resonate with me. Particularly the last point that you made about love. That's something that I'm exploring in my writing as well, and also this idea of the ritualistic, and that mingling of myth and of the mythic and the real, and weaving in and out of it in your narrative. That was absolutely beautifully done. My question is a little more prosaic, but I think very important to understand in terms of the work that we all do. And my question is about the idea of the collective. You just spoke about the collective and how you've all grown in different ways through the work that you do. Could you speak a little bit about the Jangama Collective and how you work together as a collective, and how does working as a collective affect the work that you do?
Yeah. It's a very young collective. We are people, like very young people from different backgrounds, who are mostly from theater, but also from filmmaking, from activism, from research, and all that. I think, see, something that like keeping our collective very alive and going, it's the life spirit that we all have. The survival is becoming like a very day-to-day thing, that we have to work and we have to survive. At the same time, we know that unless we build these expressions through films, through songs, through plays, we cannot survive. We cannot really survive, because all the, like, every day, every single day that we have been witnessing these kind of atrocities. And also, like, we are taking what really like informing our collective is that we are always in conversation with the older generation of Dalit movement in Karnataka, whether it is Kotiganalli Ramaya or Devnur Mahadeva or this Ramdev Rake or Dhu Saraswati. These people are really guiding us in a way. And the collective really keeps you, like, it forces you to be democratic. It forces you to be very imaginative and intuitive, at the same time very democratic. And like the struggle is that, like, the biggest struggle is not ideological struggle, because we know that we have a very common ground, where, which is like, for us the common ground is Ambedkar, and that is what like keeps us together and tied. The struggle has been like, how do we sustain these kind of models where there's no like proper infrastructure, proper fund or anything like that. It's like keeping our like surviving in a day-to-day level, and also keeping these collectives. It's always been a challenge, but like what we have managed to do interestingly is that through our performances, we managed to build this self-sustainable model, like where we perform and we pay, and we perform and we pay, and these kind of things that somehow we managed to develop for last 4 or 5 years. But I don't know how long it's going to sustain. But this has been our journey. Like we share like very common interests, at the same time lots of differences in terms of gender, in terms of sexual identities, in terms of like many things. But at the same time, what is interesting is like these conflicts are like forcing us to create new works, like new works which have this conversation. Yeah, for us, like this kind of living and like creating these performances as not being like two separate things. They are like merging into one and another. Yeah.
So I just want to reflect very quickly on Gopika's question and what Lakshman was saying, because I think that uh, in comparison, and I think Bob Marley from Kodehali is a very beautiful play in illustrating some of these questions about what is the role of the collective, because right now it is also in the post collective aftermath that Jangama Collective comes together, because the Dalit movement and its fragmentation. So these are two interesting models to think about. And the question emerges in the play as well, because forced with this situation where three actors, three people have to conceal their caste and are living in a certain kind of anonymity in the city context without the support of the movement. When they're confronted with the problem, they have only themselves and only stories and only a history of a movement to look back towards. They do not have the movement itself to fall back on. And also, in terms of this idea of heterogeneity that Lakshman is talking about, that the questions that a collective now has to face is about this question of intersectionality. How do you think about gender? How do you think about queerness? How do you think about caste simultaneously? And how do you think about the rural and the urban? Because the context of many people who are coming into the Jangama Collective is that they have some roots in the rural context, but are trying to carve out a new life in cities like Bangalore. And I think that play was kind of reflective in the sense that this idea of concealment or passing, when we treat it as an academic kind of subject, we think of it as emerging in certain kinds of urbanism. It's a problem of certain kinds of urbanism. But here you have a story, a mythic story that has been performed for centuries in rural context, which is a story of caste concealment. And they bring that into their own urban context to make sense of their situation. And we see it that, when you go out into rural contexts and perform the same play, that people in rural contexts are understanding of the issue of caste concealment in urban context. So, I mean, this long-winded way of saying that I think Jangama Collective is really at a number of intersections. And even though it's not a movement in the sense of building that mass strength or power, it has a certain kind of discursive power because it's trying to create new kinds of connections and new kinds of narratives. So it's really in a very good and strong position right now to give a certain direction, and that has been acknowledged. This relationship with the older generation where they have acknowledged, there's a moment in an interview where Devnur Mahadeva says that Jangama Collective has managed to do things that took us a decade, and they managed to do it overnight, in terms of creating certain shifts in perception. So I think that is something that is worth thinking about and acknowledging, that even though it's not just about theater. The question of performance is a question about how caste has been performed and how anti-caste politics can be performed.
And I'm just adding a footnote here, just before I give the mic to Alvin, because you're going to tell us more about this this focus on the collective. In the chapter you are working on, and many among us in this room are actually contributing and collaborating on this volume, co-edited volume, which is very much going to be a collective volume as well. So I just wanted to remind everyone of that other work also that is going on. Alvin?
Hi, I'm Alvin, a writer from Singapore, and so I'm going to take the questions in a different direction, and I feel obliged to ask this, right? And it is about whether it's all right. I'm just trying. I'll just stoop down. Yeah. So I'm wondering. I was fascinated and discombobulated by the play, which is good because I like being unsettled, which is probably an unusual trait for Singaporeans. But I was curious about whether you thought this play that we've just seen could ever be, if you could imagine it being staged or screened, as it were, in Singapore, and what you thought the responses and resonances might be. I've got my own ideas. I'd love to hear yours as well, because I think it raises very important questions, both specifically for the South Asian community in Singapore, which is a significant aspect of our society, as well as more general questions, human questions to do with divisions of politics, social divisions, ethnic divisions, and so on. But since you have that experience, I'd really love to hear your take on that. Thank you.
I mean, it's very tricky to answer that question. I lived in Singapore for quite long, like for 3-4 years.
I think
and
it's
I
just
studied
like
there.
a continuation.
Sorry,
Okay.
we just have one
Sorry.
more.
No.
Sorry.
Go.
Hi, I'm Preeti, and I'll be very honest, the first half an hour of the play was a little confusing, and it took a while to get into it and understand all the cultural connotations as well. So my question I just wanted to add on to Alvin's question as well, and it might be a little basic, but I just wanted to ask, like, as a playwright, it was so region specific that despite being from the south of India, I'm from Goa, and so despite being from more or less like the same region, there was still a lot of distance between the way in which caste was being spoken about, the myths were being spoken about, the narration and how it was happening. There was still a lot of difference, and I wanted to know if it was a deliberate move that wherein you ask the audience, yeah, yes, you do your homework, we are not going to give it to you straight on, or and if that is the case, then just like Alvin said, how are you approaching it in terms of like a more international movement as well, or a more national movement as well? Because I know caste politics differs probably like from one small village to another small village, but at the end of the day, there also needs to be a conversation wherein differences do end up having some sort of a narrative coherence as well. So I just wanted to know your thoughts regarding this, and I'm sorry for hijacking your question, Alvin. Yeah.
I mean, like for me, the two different questions. Like I lived in Singapore for quite long, like 3-4 years. I think like Singapore people will be very confused to see this play. I feel, but like if my classmates, all the theater people who comes there and sees, I think they'll start to look at all the techniques of the play. The no, it's there in the this thing. Some of the Beijing opera elements are there in the play. Like as a theater language, it's very intercultural for me in a way that they might start to resonate with that. And also for me, this play is very Dravidian, which is like which could like people can resonate from, like who are there are lots of Tamil population in Singapore, and also Vietnamese, like Indonesian, all these people, like even Indonesia's like mass kind of these kind of rituals, these people would resonate with it a lot. I feel like for its the theatrical language, that is my feeling, but I still like I cannot be sure about it. I really cannot be sure, because the theater scene that I have seen in Singapore is very different from what like we have created in DaklaKatha. I mean, not just to Singapore, even within India, it's very different. People have told me things that like they didn't understand this. I don't know how they are watching this play. This kind of things that I've heard, and I understand that. And for like Preeti's question, like see, for me, this question of aesthetics is very important. I think somebody's art becomes very not so familiar for us because we're not so familiar with the life of these communities. And I'd rather ask the audience or anybody for that sake, go like not with the thing like go do your research, like I have created this great piece. No, not with that attitude. Get familiar with these communities, like by living, by acknowledging, by reading and all that. And for me, the truth in art comes from being very sincere and truthful to the story that you're sharing, and also the land that story is taking place. For me, it has to be very specific to that part. And I will not do anything to make it sound like or make it look like international. I don't want to, because these are the things for me, the like very political things. They make the moment if you expect me to change the language, an aesthetical language, that is not my choice. Even if people don't understand it, they hate it for something else or like whatever reason, I still like try to choose this kind of sincerity to the narrative and the story and the people that belong to that universe itself. If that universe is very not so familiar to the people who are watching it, I think that's fine for me. That's completely fine for me. And it's also a take of Siddhaya. And he says once like, I don't write poetry for you to understand it. I want you to feel it. And like for me, I'm quite sure about the moment you see this play or witness this play, you will feel certain things. Maybe you don't understand certain things. Many people won't understand certain things, but I'm not doubtful about the feeling that this play that can create through its music, through its colors, through its voice, and everything. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Arya's coming with a question.
Hi, my name is Arya. I'm sorry I missed the play. I came specifically for the play, but I didn't know it was rescheduled. Yeah, but the answers you gave, they're like absolutely brilliant. So I just wanted to ask this one question. That's, like if you go through social media, that you can see a general ignorance about caste across India, especially among the elitist young generation. Because if you see the comments, people are, where is caste in India, bro? We don't have any more caste system, bro. You might have seen that. And I think, so as a young collective, constantly trying to speak about caste and to engage in these kind of conversations, where do you see yourself? Like, how do you navigate this change in people's perception of caste? Because I don't think in India right now, beyond reservation, I don't think this is being spoken about. Like, I think that the narrative has changed, and we really do believe that economic prosperity will naturally somehow transform to social acceptance, but which is not true. So how do you navigate through this change? Do you think education, in schools or in colleges, do we talk enough about the caste system and this general ignorance about caste system? How do you see it? Like, where do you place yourself in this changing, this whole thing about pan-Indian Hinduism and stuff that's going on? Which group of people do you target? Who do you want to reach, basically? And are you afraid of this whole ignorance that basically is growing among the new generation of people in India, young people? Does that bother you? Thank you.
I mean, for me, the younger generation is a bigger generic term, right? And also there are stratas, different stratas. Like my focus and our collective's focus, it's this bro generation only. If you look at our Bob Marley from Kodihalli, we created that play to engage with Dalit youngsters, like because I really think because if you look at the characters in the play, like there's one stand-up comedian and who makes reels constantly. I really want to our engagement is like we want to engage with youth. But like I think what I don't want to get into is that this educating elite youngsters is not my job, but strengthening the Dalit youth and building this from the within, the roots of it, that has been the focus of Jangama Collective. And I'm not very scared, like even like I see this, like I'm not like making this like just throwing comment, but I'm very much sure about it. See, more and more the elitists are becoming ignorant. The like Dalit youngsters are becoming more and more aware. That is what I see it as a strength. the assertion is becoming quite like very strong, and it's expressing in different kinds of language. There are people from like Dalit caste who are doing stand-up comedy, who are doing singing, rap, and all that, and that I see as hope, something, and also educate. I think all this time, like as a Dalit intellectuals or like creative practitioners, we have given lots of space to upper caste non-Dalit people, even in our imagination, even in our narratives, even in our stories. I think it's enough now. We no need to give them so much space. It's like that's why if you look at my plays, there are not many upper caste characters. There are no characters actually. There are no upper caste, like non-Dalit characters in the play. Like we should show them we can live without your existence. I mean, it's an ideal thing, but it is possible. Like if we start to build this kind of assertion in Dalit youth, for elitists and upper caste people, it becomes inevitable for them to accept it. It becomes like a challenge that you have to accept it at some point. Maybe it would take longer time, but they have to accept it at some point. Yeah.
Thank you.
And just add to that very briefly, which is what Lakshman was talking about, how his plays is a dialogue within. So both DaklaKatha is somewhere the people are speaking, Dalit characters are speaking inwards within themselves. And that does not exclude the fact that there is a deliberate strategy also to perform in many venues where there probably is very few Dalit people in the audience. So this is going hand in hand. And with Bob Marley of Kodehalli as well, these are three young people speaking to each other, but the audience, in many cases, and I know this because I did a whole, maybe about 30 or 40 interviews, phone interviews with audience members chosen at random. There's a large section of them who don't come from, Dalit communities, and they are listening in, whatever that means. It's not Lakshman's responsibility to speak to them. It's his responsibility to speak inwards and have conversations within. And in that process, if other people are interested in listening in, this has always been a radical openness that even the Dalit Sangharsh Samiti in Karnataka had cultivated, where they had people from across communities part of their organizational structure, not in leadership positions, but they are welcomed. It's a radically inclusive space. And I think that's something that also Jangama is cultivating, but it's the conversations and the key people who are in positions to talk are having those conversations, up to others to see what they want to take out of that.
Oh, thank you so much. You were warmly invited to join our roundtable. We'll have a little break, but before you think about it, let us give them a round of applause, please.
Thank you.
So we'll have a little break. In about 10 minutes or so, we'll have a roundtable. If you want, you can stay on. Right, we will see you quite massively on the screen, if you want. And you'll see there's tiny little figures there. So it's up to you. We wanted to start this roundtable with two messages. Well, one message and one poem that Gogu sent us yesterday. Gogu was very sad, that first her plane was changed and then we changed everything and then it was still kind of delayed by several days, which of course would be like next week or so, right? So unfortunately, Gogu couldn't be here, but her words, I want them to be here, and we will postpone the event that we had planned with her and just do it online later on. Okay, so these are now Gogu's words. Congratulations to CADALFEST 2025, dear Nicole and Judith, and all the other participants at CADALFEST. Congratulations and J Beam. I am so glad to connect with you with a few words in this difficult situation. However, I've been deeply missing the fabulous environment of CADALFEST this year of 2025. I miss the energy, the music of voices and rhythm of songs, poetry, and the sense of belonging you create. And also, I've been excited to participate in the fest with preparation and many new thoughts to share with you all on my panel with Basma and Priteegandha. The reason is that I have been writing experimentally about the caste system in India in the form of speculative fiction and magic realism. It was part of that, the big story I wrote, The Phantom Ladder, translated by Divya Kalavala, was published by Bluffed. Similarly, the Telugu poem I wrote, called Tiyati Shatruvu, sorry about that, the English title, The Uncanny Friend, translated by Priyanka, the Telugu version was published in a Telugu literary paper. I prefer to write anti-caste thought in speculative fiction because it gives us plenty of scope to explore thoughts. Not only does pain resonate, but it also reflects self-assertion and resilience and fraternity. Unexpected disruptions of the thoughts. So far, we are aware of the devastation of terrorism and war on the human world and nature. Now, is it shadowing on our thoughts? It made me absent from the fest. It may have been an obstacle to expressing ideas, but I did not think of it as an obstacle. The future is ours. Here's what I believe strongly, and I'm hoping for new journeys to new fests. I hope we all can come together for these cultural, literary celebrations and research gatherings again and again soon. Best wishes to all. Warm regards, Gogu, Shyamala.
The Uncanny Friend by Gogu Shyamala, translated by Priyanka. She has an uncanny friend, a mysterious companion, who defies definition, but knows her innermost secrets. She who is buried at the bedrock of caste sees her now canny, now uncanny friend, and finds that many questions remain unanswered. Is this a friend-shaped enemy? Or enemy-shaped friend? How can one know them, or befriend them, or love them when they hide themselves? This canny, uncanny friend who clings so tight, whose firm clasp cannot be seen, whose closeness cannot be heard. They are shapeshifters and gender benders. Their friendship, rife with restless contradictions, evades explanation. Guram Chachuva once wrote, poverty and caste prejudice were his gurus, but she called them friends, the uncanny friends. What else can you call those who forever cling to your side? Like a toddler longing for its mother, like a husband's embrace for his wife, the uncanny friend grips her like a womb around the fetus. Everything, the grave, the wood, the metal door, water and soil, was visible to her, but not her uncanny friends. She could not see or hear them, even when they were wrapped around her body like a garment or a coil of wire. Instead of her child, they, with their fangs, sucked blood, not milk, from her breasts. How could she stop them? They remained unseen and unheard. She could only tell that there was not enough breast milk for her child when it wanted some. But what could she do? She had an inkling that these uncanny friends had fattened the village elites with her blood, increasing their lifespan, while they sucked her dry, chewed her up, grounding down to her bones, taking 14 full years from her life for death to claim her. Even after all this, she could not tell when exactly these uncanny friends entered her life. She did not meet them as you ordinarily would on the playground or in school. This jiggery friendship was ascribed at birth. She was born with these uncanny friends. Did it matter if they liked or disliked each other? If they respected each other or not? That's not the point. Like or dislike, love or hate, that's not the point. It does not count. Janido, like or dislike, Janido. That's not the point. It does not count. These uncanny friends who cast her out to the 5th rung of the caste ladder are now returned as potential husbands. Marriages, it is said, are fixed in heaven. But hers was fixed very much on this earthly plane with this uncanny friend. How can one even explain this ever shape-shifting frenemy? Even the 10 avatars of Vishnu will not be enough. Both her house and the hearth turned into battlefronts, catching fire and burning everything down to soot. When her life crumbled into dust, she yearned for a little bit of that life-giving oxygen. She looked for movement, even a trace of activity. When the 3 stubborn tamarind trees in the village swayed, pouring life-giving strength into her, a smile quietly spread on her visage. She rose, phoenix-like, from the ashes. But the uncanny friend returned yet again in a modern disguise, to apply a sweet balm to old wounds, seducing her into subjugation over and over again, seizing the moment, placing the sacred pitha next to her, it sat down, bindas. Beneath it lay severed heads of those lost in the furious standoff of caste violence. As the crowned kings and their loyal queens danced, with crooked smiles they returned to us the bravery of Alisama, Manisha, Rajava, as token honors, empty ceremonial tributes. But really, what else is new? It took us 4 decades to come together to share a handful of grains. The chains that have tied us and hold us back, we don't fully know them yet. But she is still a slave, shackled on this Ved Bhumi. These chains wear the disguise of soft smiles and pillowy flowers, forever choking her in a suffocating embrace. As the spectre of this hypocrisy haunts her yet again. Just when change seems inevitable, she let the sunrise brush her cheek. With no one to see or hear, she asked in a small, halting voice, "When will you, me and us together, embrace the same humanness, friend? When will we get to live full lives, friend?" Thank you. Sorry, switching. Yes. So we're just probably switching directly into the Roundtable, which is a bit of a difficult exercise. I mean, triangular table. This is, oh yeah.
And if you just hold it towards the top, because if you hold it around there, please.
Okay.
A bit higher up the microphone.
Put your hand higher up. If you put your hand there.
That's it, great, thank you.
So we wanted to end, in fact, these 2 days with again, a collective, exercise and conversation. So as we were preparing, thinking about, this roundtable, we were thinking of the potential title that we could, give it, and there were a couple of, email messages about this in order to, try and give it a direction, a kind of route, in order to encapsulate the general, spirit of the roundtable and also of these 2 days of CADALFEST. So in fact, we thought of titles like, as you know, that was in the email, Creation in Times of Emergency, Creation Under Constraint, Creativity Under Duress, and this is a phrase that you used as well. So of course, these phrases are going to ring many bells with many among you. And so maybe we could start from these potential, titles and their potential implications. And of course, these implications are not going necessarily to be the same, depending on the part of the planet we live in and the communities we live in. So some of them will resonate, differently, or potentially not be relevant at all, because the situation we are in, we, as in Europeans, would not necessarily, be in echo for so many other people for whom the situation is constantly extremely difficult. But then there were so many different topics that have emerged, in fact, and that have been, that kept crisscrossing and intersecting over these couple of days. That we also feel that this roundtable is an opportunity to reflect, on those topics and at least on some of them. So, for instance, maybe one of these questions could be the one of, the ways in the plural, the ways artists approach and deal with the topic that they are addressing, that they have chosen to address, with what medium, with what methodology, and from what perspective, because this has also emerged as quite crucial. So it's all about, the choices you make about creating what Gopika has just called, those radical spaces of openness. How do you go about that, and that question of the methodology and the medium. So maybe, so here are, two questions, in fact, for you to maybe, respond to in the first stage. And that question of, creativity under constraint, under duress, or creation in times of emergency, but also the question of the methodology. So this would be for all of you to tackle, to grab and play with.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to ask. Aren't Lakshmana?
No, he's no. Gopika, do you want to start? Or? Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Judith, and thank you both, Judith and Nicole, for surfacing all these questions through these 2 days. And the fact that these questions have come to us in the way that they have come to us, and the fact that they've come together in this manner is a testament to the work that you both do, and what you've put into bringing this program together. And it is from what you've brought together here that these questions have emerged for me, have surfaced. They're questions that I've worked with for a very long time. And it is very interesting for me to see them emerge in the work of other people as well. And I think that tells me something about the juncture that we are at. Collectively, as individuals, as academics, as artists who are concerned about the world that we live in, and are attempting to engage with it in ways that are radically different. So, the question that, Judith asked about, how do we engage them? What are the things we engage with? How do we engage with them? And how do we develop this method through which we can engage with them? And for me, I think Jayan put it very beautifully, in that slide with his questions. And I'd like to bring up those questions. Not questions really, he put that method down as, what do you do when you're trying to engage with a community? What do you do as an artist? And these are the things that he said. He said, enter as a listener, not as an authority. Collaborate, don't extract. Practice reflexivity. Challenge stereotypes. Share power over the narrative. Make the film's impact reciprocal. Avoid the savior complex. And contextualize with care. And as I saw these on the slide, in orange and blue, not black and white, it struck me that these are exactly what I practice as well, and what I've been, and it is a practice that I have evolved over a period of time. And what was also very interesting to see is these are the very same things that emerge from what Lakshmana was saying. Yeah. So I'd like to pick up a couple of things here which I think are important for developing a kind of methodology for working. And I think what we should strive to do is try to develop a method that cuts across different artistic media, different artistic practices. And I think it needs to be centered on the person, the creator, and what we are trying to do, rather than the product that emerges. And I think that can give us, that can be our contribution, that is a larger contribution to what it means to create in these times. Now, two things that I want to focus on here. One is, or three rather, one is the idea of love. And then how do we approach what we are doing with that, with love as, with love at the center? And then what does it mean to love? Not just ourselves and individuals, but to open up that idea of love for, love for the world, and love for our environment. So that's one. The second thing I think we need to focus on is this idea of reflexivity. How can we be reflexive, and how can we how can we sit with the material and live with the materials, the ideas, the communities that we work with, and how is that going to influence us as creators, as artists? And I think the last point that I want to make is that idea of contextualizing with care. And I think all these three are intertwined, and one will influence the other. So I'd like to just leave these three ideas of love, of practicing reflexivity, and of contextualizing with care, no matter what it is that our practice is. And I'll just leave these thoughts, and as I leave these thoughts with you, I also want to hear more from you about how you approach these and what you think we can do to deepen our practice and to engage better.
I can go next. As a creative, I am a little bit different from Jan, in that Jan goes to a community and engages with them. Now, my positionality is a bit different because I am the community. So I am the one with the lived experience. So I can't go to them because them is me. So what I always do as a practice is, first of all, when we are co-creating, whether it's with people from outside, is we need to be involved from the very design stage. You can't talk of collaboration without someone having been on the drawing board, at the drawing board. So whatever practice that, whatever medium that you want to get involved in, let the person with the lived experience be at the drawing board from day one. So many instances we see people being, being dropped in at the very end as a tick box measure. And then you hear creatives saying, oh, we were working with the people with lived experience. But that is not it, you know. If you don't involve them from the very concept of that project, you are not doing anything. Essentially, all you're doing is fulfilling the stereotypes. And when you involve people with the lived experience, you are now checking out the stereotype. Now you've got a project that can actually go forward. So I just wanted to add to those three things that you talked about. If you are to be involved with a particular community, involve them from point one. You know, I have been, in my case, because I research refugee and asylum issues, I've been invited to an artist who has already produced a particular project. And only on the exhibition stage does he want to involve refugees or asylum seekers. And this person said, we want asylum seekers to be holding this particular art piece only at the design, only at the exhibition stage. I was able to push back and say, but why do you need black hands to touch that particular project? Did you ever have any black hands in the designing of that particular project? And these are the stereotypes, these are the problems that we see again and again and again. As creatives, when you're dealing with people with this particular community, involve them from the very instance so that they can see, they can identify with the project from day one. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
I just want to elaborate a little bit on the contextualize with care part of it. Vasava and I were talking yesterday about how to expand the conversation and make it a little bigger, but also obviously a lot more nuanced. And one of the main themes that emerged from our conversations was this concept of allyship. That when we talk about solidarities, when we talk about growing the movement, we talk about cutting across a lot of the categories that divide us, but obviously we do it with a lot more care. Do you want to take it forward?
Yeah, so can you hear me? Yeah. So actually yesterday we were talking about how we were going to handle the roundtable, and the concept of allyship is not something new, but we were not satisfied with how it is being discussed currently, and it is being like kind of hijacked. And as you know, by either like PhD students or also academics. So we were just thinking that without, trying to revolutionize anything, how could we use allyship or rethink, make room actually for just more reflections on how allyship should be, or could be rather than should, could be conceptualized. And so I think that one thing could be the financial aspects from dominant groups. If someone interested in researching a marginalized community or a minority history or culture, then if this person is from a dominant group, they should definitely consider or reflect on their ability, their financial means, on how to support or how to facilitate. This is a word that Professor Mizrahi Barak told me the first time I met her, and this is also why I clicked facilitate. Facilitate and how to make an echo, because we, as Europeans, have the possibility of being a platform, not trying to like appropriate the voices, but try to just make an echo and be that Zoom link between communities. So I think that allyship needs to be completely reshuffled and be part of the conversation. I think that creation in times of emergency can also be a good opportunity to rethink of allyship, because we have no time, even if that sounds like a bit alarmist. But we were talking about the future this morning, so I think that allyship needs to be part of that conversation for sure. So it was a bit longer than I expected.
Please.
You look like you want to say something.
You want me?
No, you just felt like
I was just thinking of passing the mic, but I think now mic is in my hand.
You need to hold it.
Yeah, I think mic is in now my hand. So the urge to create something on and about Dalits or the marginalized. You know, I have seen the excitement among the Savarnas to create something about Dalits or about, you know, the marginalized community. So I sometime as a social worker, like background in social work, I feel that you need something, the suffering to tell the stories. Like you need to showcase the suffering of the Dalits. But I think that sometimes there is a need to also work within your community. Like as a upper caste, why don't you work with your community to create something which tell us the perspective of the dominant. Like I recently now Professor Ravikant, he has recently published his book Meet the Savarna. So he doesn't talk about the Dalits experiences, the autobiographical experiences of Dalit, their suffering, their pain, the humiliation, but he talks about the Savarnas, the Jainjis, that Savarnas children, that how they that fascinated with the new sort of world, and then when they heard something about Dalits, they are very keen to learn, and that they want to visit their house, and that they want to click pictures. So that is the question, is that at the same time I also feel that we need a solidarity and the allyship, and in my thesis as well I have the outline that we need a broader the terminology, and which is anti-caste, and no matter which community you come from, if you have that idea, that consciousness that we talk about, like talk in Dalit literature, that Ambedkarite or the Dalit consciousness that you have, you can be part of that larger, the Ambedkarite movement, the community, but still that these people are working, the Dalits are working for their community, like the Lakshmana has told that we are here to strengthen the voices of Dalit youth, not to teach or not to that sensitize the upper caste youth and upper caste people. It's not our duty. We are the sufferer, and we didn't create this system. So it's not our duty to abolish or to inherit this system. So at the same time, making this solidarity and allyship, we also need to create some sort of workshop or some sort of work among the upper caste people as well, so that then we can see the broader picture, that how, because sometimes the people in their home, the household, they speak about all these dominant ideological things and the stereotypes, Dalits, but when they come out from their household, they talk about the liberation and all this the Dalit movement and all. So first think is to start from your house, from your home, and then think about the allyship, and that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, if I could just add, you can give it the mic. Yeah, if I could just add one point, because, and this I see it very often internationally, the sectors that are meant to be helping subjugated communities sometimes are the worst culprits, the humanitarian sector. An example is UNHCR. They are terrible in that they are the ones who dehumanize, for example, refugees. How many times do you see stories by UNHCR where you have the first name and the surname of a refugee. Hardly. There is this poverty porn that they want to use, using members of our community. They always want to speak about refugees. They never speak with refugees. And I see that so many times with international organizations. And that's a practice that I think we need to be developing, even with working with the Dalit community or whatever. Work with the members of the particular community. Don't work at or something like that.
I'm going to repeat what Gopika and everybody has said in different words, but in a bit more personalized way. Yeah, spare me some time. Yeah, creating in during the periods of emergency. I mean, Bertolt Brecht's name was uttered. Will there also be singing during dark times? There will be singing about dark times, and not just necessarily about the dark times. We have other things to say, right? And I understand the word constrained, the present moment in two different ways. I mean, interconnected ways, of course. One, what's happening in the world, and one, the other, what's happening within the academia, right? As Gopika said, we need to be collaborative and collective. I am a translator. I translate between Tamil and English. Translation is in itself an act of, it's a collaborative act in itself. As a translator, you stand in the liminal space, yeah, and then you engage with the author. That's sort of an alation, right? Within the Dalit context, I am a non-Dalit, but not an upper caste, but a non-Dalit, but still, and translation offers me that kind of a space where I transform myself or I seek to become anti-caste, as well as engaging with what Dalits have to teach us, right? That is one way of me being, active here. And translations have always played that role. I think it's great that we started with the translation session here. I think CADALFEST also can invest more on translations as it is doing already. I was introduced to Israel, but it's through translation. For example, this resistance can happen across languages and contexts. Right? For example, when Muhammad Darush's poetry was translated into Tamil by M.A. Numan in Sri Lanka, it spoke so much to the Tamil Iram scene during the civil wars. Yeah? It shaped Tamil Iram poetry. In that way, translation can be that. Right? And I'm also a PhD student working on Tamil studies in English literature and creative writing department in the UK. Right? I think the current constraint in the academia, within the academia, can actually help us, is what I feel. I for one is optimistic because I think, picking up from what Neeraj said, see, it's not just enough to speak about Dalit literature and Dalits, right? And it's enough with this objectification. I think we need to think through, what Dalits have offered us and what anti-caste movements and struggles and thinkers have offered us. For example, my own reading of Tamil literature, history and culture have been shaped by the Tamil Dalit scholar, 19th century scholar called Jitendra, right? And thinking through this, I think it has transformed the mainstream disciplines and fields. We don't necessarily need funding and new disciplines for us to do research, is what I feel. Within the fields which needs rethinking. What happens these days is you do field work and social work kind of research, and that would be on the one side, and theoretical stuff, philosophical stuff from which we would draw and be inspired from, that would be different. I mean, they won't meet and they won't be altered, and we will be repeating in Indian academia, we would repeat what the 60s and 70s French thinkers have to say, and you need to apply those theories on the texts, and not rethink and reshape those thoughts and philosophies and theories. Right? And I think acting that way and acting within quote-unquote mainstream disciplines of knowledge will also help us, go to new pastures. And I think in that way, collaborative acts and collective acts can take us to new places. Thank you so much.
Grab the nearest mic.
PhD has been really personal for me. Yeah, I always felt like I am in this in-between space where I kind of do not understand Santali culture a lot. And this PhD has made me understand quite different things, make me critically think, although I have Santali heritage. But I think it comes with a lot of responsibility, both sides. So when we are writing about a particular thing or about a particular community, we have to know them well. We have to be in their shoes first, and then probably we can represent them well. And whenever we belong to the community, it also comes with a lot of responsibility, if at all we are representing ourselves well or no. Because all of these Adivasi writers, I have seen this trend, question themselves. That I also do. So I think there is responsibility both sides, and we have to be more understanding. And also, while we were writing the chapter for decennial volume, we realized how knowledge was very collaborative in nature. Knowledge was very accessible to the community. So when we were analyzing Rajbangshi and Santali literature, we realized that the authors had no authority over their work. They felt that they are not the sole owners. They were just transporting it into a new medium. They were just, translating it into a new medium of the film and the faishas. I think they also suggested us to rethink, reanalyze, and reflect on how we can co-write, co-understand, co-learn, and co-write with them. So I think, that is the thing that we got while analyzing for the decennial volume. And I hope I understand my community a lot more. So yeah.
I don't know, as I was listening to everyone talk, I especially like this part about how, this idea of, the Jangama Collective also said, we are trying to strengthen the Dalit youth and not just teach others. I think there is a reflection of that thought in Rajbangshi literature that I am aware of, and also in some of the Dalit literatures from Bengal that I am aware of. I think this is something I have been thinking about in my PhD thesis as well, about representation of the self that is not limited to victimization. Representation of the self which celebrates their life and their cultures. So I think this is a hopeful thing. I think just because our lives, our Dalit lives, are so much defined by all the hardships and the marginalizations that we have faced and have faced for generations, that does not mean that we ignore the happiness and the love that we can show and that we feel and express. So I think there should be a lot of focus on this aspect when we as scholars, research things and not just, look at the dichotomy between the upper caste and the lower caste and the interactions and the relationships. And I think those are important for, for both the Savarnas and the Dalits, because I feel like caste studies is not just a Dalit issue. It has to be discussed among everyone. Yes, it is obviously a Dalit issue, but also I feel like Savarnas also should be engaging with these texts. Dalit literature is not just for Dalits, it's for everybody. And I think that I'm hopeful for a future where we try to understand each other as equals, as, not just, of course we'll have lived differences and lived experiences, but I don't want that to, keep us from having empathy and understanding about each other's cultures and way of being. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Hello. So it's probably this, I can only talk about as an artist. You know, I'm not a scholar, an academic or anything. I'm not an anthropologist. I'm not trying to engage through my work, poetry and film, not in a particular community. Sometimes I feel like, as Alan put it, and you are the community. Though I never feel like belongs to a particular community at all. Probably I'm just constantly putting myself in trial through my works. My poetry, sometimes all my works, poetry or film, I try to express myself, not particularly represent any community. Through my work, even various films and poetry, poetry is a long process, is kind of very loner expression. And actually, my films are the extension of my poetry. So my serious visual narrative is Shape of the Shapeless, which is in New York, and underground New York theater, marginal underground New York theater, which is actually area of the people who is not even considered burlesque as an art. When I travel with Rose about 4 years, more than 2006 to 2010, the underground theaters of New York, and Rose is himself not identified with as female or male, and who probably called herself an androgynous person. And the sexual plurality, and also I was questioning myself and my sexuality, and also I was traveling. That film's not about Rose, about myself. So in relation with my environment. So then I moved to Papilya Buddha, which is about really the topography of the Western Ghats and the people who lives there. And happened to be displaced Dalit and Adivasi groups there. So Papilya Buddha is about that. But actually, that is also my personal expression with the topography of that region, the Edekal archival rocks, and the trees and plants and thousands of biodiversity there, and the flowers and humans and birds. Papilya Buddha is a butterfly, which belongs to Papilio papilioni. People call it Malabar banded peacock. But that work is considered as about the land struggles in that area. And the people who I work with are not typical film actors, but they are actors. They are acting for my camera according to my instructions. So where ultimately I am the decision maker aesthetically, as I am writing poetry. I don't allow anyone to intervene my aesthetic choice. So I am probably in a misplaced position among the political correctness, what so-called political correctness we try to propagate. But I have some kind of decency when I am dealing with another human being as another beings, another non-beings too. But when I come back to the other Kabodiscapes, also part of the movement in Kerala, a bunch of youth using their body as a tool of resistance, as a political expression. that the film about resistance, as an artist, a right to express. And I believe for an artist, the artistic freedom is absolute. There is no compromise in it. I do express without filtering. I hate censorship. My relationship with the Censor Board of India is a long litigations. And I give my life blood for that. And I'm ready to die to defend my artistic freedom. And when I am extending, this recent work is Rhythm of Damam, is happened to happen on the other side of Western Ghats, where the just other slope of Western Ghats, where I shot Papilya Buddha. Then the majority community there, that particular, my friends and my life there, since 2018, I constantly living there, interacting with there, my surroundings and people, I tell a story. That is my story too. I am also part of a displaced diaspora. Sometimes I'm getting out of the humanity. In certain extent, in my personal life, being a misanthrope, you can call it. And actually, I express with my surroundings, people I am interacting with, the nature I interact with. I capture the igneous rock which exploded that region once when the Indo-Australian plate, so-called the platelets, it is go and hit the Asia. And when the Himalaya emerged, actually all the rocks you are seeing, the caves, that is very ancient as me. And the moonlight fall upon the rocks, reflecting me. And at the same time, all this energy fields and quantum fields and these humans and non-humans also interacting with me as an artist. So I don't compromise in my expressions, and I hate censorship if it is from the authorities, fascist, non-fascist or anarchist, academicians. I don't care. But as Gopika put, when we are approaching community, trying to walk into the life of the people and trying to creep into the collective imagination of community, we have to have certain decency. I don't have the lingo of fancy academic lingo to express that. We have to have that decency. No, I am not here to educate Savarnas or uplift or save some marginalized people. I'm trying to express myself through my stories. And probably the different categories, different interests can have their own versions of my work. I'm open to criticism for all. But ultimately it is my work. If I pretended it is not, that will be a lie. And I hate it. And be honest in your work. That I don't advise anybody, but that's my thought. But I share my work with other people. Once I start to share with them, that's also their work too. And their text, whatever text they can read out of it. And that text mattered to them, not for me. And my identity really doesn't matter. So what they are reading out of it, it is the matter. So I am not a savior, I am not a liberator, I'm just a storyteller, but I am not telling the story of others, but I'm telling my story by my surrounding, wherever I associate that period. So last 35 years or 36, I left India like 35 years ago, where I grew up, probably my formative years. I never went out of my village. When I growing up, the first time I exposed to some cities, Mumbai, never been in Delhi, end up in New York, in Harlem. I went to school there, and I interact with all kind of people, my friends, Caribbeans to Brazilians to Afro-Americans, the part of the all minority movements. At the same time, there was dominant forces, which is kind of American WASP identities there. But when I come out of my People's Republic of New York to the villages, to towns, I interact, I sense the presence of the dominant forces on my skin. That is the same as I feel the existence of the atmosphere surrounding me. So I cannot escape from it. Only thing I can escape to my inner self. From my inner escape, I start to express as poetry. Then I start to visualize poetry, that same poetry through camera. And all my works are there though. I don't have to explain to anyone. And I hate people censoring me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayan. That was very clear. And I mean, you know, people who have been attacking you and criticizing you for all the wrong reasons as well, and you know, whether you are from the community. So that question of, you know, perspective, I mean, those people really do not know anything about your work. And so I want to, you know, thank you for what you have just said, and it's very clear. And as we all know, gatekeeping is everywhere. And we should definitely go against any form of gatekeeping, whatever the direction they're coming from.
Is there anyone else who would like to say something? Something they would like to get off their chest?
So, I'm not an artist, maybe I am, but I'm a researcher primarily. But the thing I want to add is I come from a very casteist, upper class Hindu household. So when I started researching on domestic abuse survivors from black and minoritized communities, I positioned myself as the most eligible person to do this research because I have experienced domestic abuse as a child. I'm a woman of color, and I really, in the first year of my PhD, I thought I am the person to talk for them. But now I'm in year 3 of my research, and I have spent enormous amount of time with the survivors from real black and minoritized communities, women of color, and I just have realized the amount of privilege that I have, honestly, and it really disturbs me to see that elitist people, privileged people, constantly dismissing the power of the privilege that you grow up in, that you enjoy every single second of your life. And I constantly have this struggle communicating with my family or with my parents or with my grandparents who still carry very subtle traces of hardcore casteism in them, but still would have the audacity to balance it. So even with movies, or even in artistic creations, we see the kind of balancing. So even in movies like you talk about the sufferings of a Dalit woman. You also necessarily don't have to talk about the sufferings of a Brahmin woman. It's very different. But I think in India right now, this has become the norm. You dismiss caste and you just don't talk about the privilege of upper caste, the Savarna people, and you think that's equality. That's just like everywhere I go and I say I'm a researcher of domestic abuse among immigrant women, and I'm essentially ask this question of, so what about men? I mean, you don't really need to. So one of the things that my supervisor told me that if you're a doctor of breast cancer, nobody is asking you, why don't you treat prostate cancer? Or why don't you treat throat cancers? They are different. They're essentially different. But I think in India right now, especially among the youth, they don't understand that there is a difference in it, and it really scares me. Because even very young children talking about them and us, because they don't see this anymore. Because maybe the Dalit communities or the underprivileged, they don't see it. They don't see how people come and take your physical waste in front of you. Maybe our parents have witnessed it. Maybe the grandparents did witness it. They did have people work for them. Maybe my children will never see any human being doing it for them. So that doesn't essentially mean that there is no caste system. That's what I said. Like the social media, it is very disturbing to see this thing about caste system is old, caste system does not exist anymore, we should talk about new problems. It is very subtle. And if you don't educate the younger generations, I think even if with every effort to empower Dalit youth, if on the other side you are just left, you just leave the youth to believe that casteism does not exist anymore, I think it will just widen the gap, and it will just make this you and me, or them and us. It will be there. And with the Hindutva politics that is in India, which is trying basically to say that caste is not a problem anymore, Hindus are all the same. There are people who want to believe that, and who are just, who don't have the avenue to see how it's different. So I think it should go hand in hand, it should be collaborative, and that conversation should essentially happen. I don't think it's the responsibility of the Dalits to educate the elitist, but there should be avenues where you can collaborate and talk about this, and that's my point. Otherwise, it's not, because I come from that background. I see it every day. There is rejection, there is dismissal of caste, because you see, if a Dalit, if a person is working in the Middle East, he is sending home money, they have a pretty big house and everything, and then you naturally tend to think that there's no caste anymore, but there always is. My grandparents wouldn't drink water from that house, I know, but they still wouldn't accept the fact that caste is a thing. That kind of dismissal is scary for me. And I think that will just affect everything that we have done so far to address this. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to say something? Quick comment? Me? I mean, thank you for sharing. I mean, it's, I don't want to bookend this with some kind of overwhelming wisdom, which I don't have, but I think what I love about CADALFEST is that we're creating quite unique spaces where there's a lot of exchange of ideas, and I think this is what I think what Judith and I always have felt, what we can contribute to the space in terms of dialogue, right? Because there are spaces created by Dalit activists, sometimes just for Dalit activists, totally, I think that's just sometimes what you need, right? Sometimes you don't want any Savarnas or any white people to kind of enter these spaces, and you just need your own community. But obviously, and the same goes for Adivasi activists, you know, from different groups and so on, but sometimes you also kind of want to have these different, right, conversations, and I think all of these serve their own distinct purposes. Apart from the fact that I just love meeting, you know, and being in such a room, you know, I mean, it always takes over a year to plan this, and on Mondays and Tuesdays before the event, I always just think, why am I doing this over and over again? And I just masochism. But then after the event, I just think it's like the best thing ever, and I'm already kind of planning with the next funding application. It's just always like that, isn't it? Because ultimately these conversations are important, and I think any kind of privilege constantly needs to be kind of, ultimately, I mean, any privilege needs to be destroyed in order for equality to be there, right? And ultimately, that's kind of the aim, and I love the way these 2 days have gone through really different iterations, and I just love the fact that we had time, right? We had time, we're not rushing through this. We had these 3 events per day, and it's quite a luxury, isn't it, from people from all over the world. I know sustainability issues, do this too often, but it's just lovely to kind of have this time to really reflect and share ideas. And it's just such a shame, right? Jitendra couldn't be here, Gogu couldn't be here, Lakshmana couldn't be here, Mohit couldn't be here, all for different reasons, almost all of which have something to do with privilege, right? And those who have it and those who don't. And there's just something that needs to be acknowledged, right? I mean, we can just let that stand in the room, because there are 4 people here who should have been here, right? And they would have been, all Dalit and Adivasi. Those are the people who are not here, right? And it's just quite gutting, really. It's just all the time we live in, but the way forward is not to just stop, right? The way forward, you have to put one foot in front of the other, right? And just see how we can create these lovely worlds that we created in Preeti's vision, which were radically egalitarian and equitable, and which were real fun, just to have a little holiday of thinking about futures that we would actually want. So that's, I think that's all I want to say. Is there anything, Judith, that you want to add?
No, just you can say something about the tomorrow.
Yes. So those of you, most of you, are invited to the writing workshop, and we will send you, so 10:30 outside the Chaucer building. We will give you a bit more details on our little app. But also we have Yamas booked for 7 o'clock for 12 people. I mean, there are 13 of us, so you're all very welcome to join us, right? I mean, we could definitely squeeze one in, yes?
Can you excuse me?
Oh, you have a friend to meet.
Yeah, just
right, absolutely. So that now we're only 12. See, that's exactly. Oh, take care. See you tomorrow, Jane. Lovely. And yes, so there's no more concluding words, but you know me, sorry. The last time I'm doing this to you. The questionnaire, which I need, Jill will tell me off if I don't come back with data as our impact champion. Yes, and so one last time I'm going to send these out, but so we can hang about here a little bit. Yeah, you can fill these in if you have any questions, and you, as if you're very, very warmly invited to kind of have a final meal with us, Yamas. Yesterday we had great fun at Kokotang, and we can just recreate that today. And Yamas, okay, thank you. And applause to all.